Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to TRTN for coverage of a special event here on the High Caliber Community League, the HCCL Race for Children. Some of you astute viewers may remember that this was attempted to be ran a couple months back at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, but after technical issues there in Belgium, we return once again to see this special event all the way to its conclusion. Moving away from Spa, then, we come to South Africa, here at the home of the former South African Grand Prix, the Grand Prix Circuit Kyalami. Founded in 1961 in the modern day comprised of 16 turns and 2.8 miles of FIA Grade 2, it is a fantastic circuit that has brought with it a very unique attitude to any calendar. Today, though, it's a single event here for the HCCL Race for Children. As always, I am Regan Clark, and I'll be your commentator for this afternoon. Taking a look into what the session entails, let's take a look first then into the session itinerary. Coming up, the 2.4 hours of Kyalami roughly translates to 144 minutes of actual racing. Before that, we have 20 minutes of free practice, of which we're in the midst of at the moment, and then 20 minutes of qualifying segmented into two halves, just like we've seen on the HCCL Multi-Class Championship. The first 10 minutes going over to the GT3s, and the last 10 minutes going over to the GT4s. During the course of the race, there'll be two mandatory pit stops for both fuel and tyres to be entailed. As for the nature of the event about St. Jude, this was a statement from HCCL on SimGrid, and it states the following. St. Jude is a non-profit organisation that helps children in need of treatment for cancer, blood disorders, neurological disorders, infectious diseases and other catastrophic childhood conditions, while not charging the family a bill so that they can focus on what matters the most without the stress. 89% of St. Jude's funding comes from donations, which is what makes this all possible. No entry fee or donation is required to enter this event. We ask if you are willing to spread the word by sharing this broadcast, and the donation link for the event you'll now find in the Twitch chat. For those of you tuning in on YouTube, you'll be finding it in the description for the video to help bring support to this great cause. And it is fantastic to back such a great organization for this race and for this event. Very, very special stuff indeed. And let's hope to make this the best event that it can be for such a great cause. Taking a look then on track at the moment, we're on board with Matthias de Munster, one of the several competitors we've seen over the course of the last couple of weeks on the HCCL Multi-Class Championship. We see him behind the wheel once again of his faithful Mercedes AMG, making his way currently down towards Ingwe Curve. We'll take a look around the field and get ourselves acclimatized to the entire grid. Somewhere in the ballpark, currently expected of 40 cars. Now more players will be joining in as the session progresses, as it starts off in the first 5 minutes for users of the Xbox Series S. That includes us, and that's just to help us load in without any issues. A lot of lessons were taken in from the first attempted running of the 2.4 hours. Originally the 2.4 hours of Spa now comes to Kyalami here in Midrand on the outskirts of Johannesburg, South Africa, for the 2.4 hours of Kyalami. It is a great circuit indeed, capacity of 100,000 people, former home, of course, of the South African Grand Prix until 1993. That last South African Grand Prix was won by Alain Prost. In the modern day, it's the home of the Kyalami 9 hours that's run at this circuit since its inception year of 1961. It was also the finale round for the 2019 Intercontinental GT Challenge, hence why it finds itself on the roster here on Assetto Corsa Competizione. As we cut away then from de Munster, we see some of the other drivers out on track. Maximilian Ratinski also with AMG at this time. And we'll get a full look around the field and get ourselves acclimatized with the drivers as the session progresses. And then we'll be on to the discussion of the balance of performance. Sadly, no qualifying data to go off of today, but hopefully that'll make up for what is growing to be an extensive grid here. A lot to be had in the near future. So taking a look at the session, we've obviously seen Matthias de Munster and Maximilian Ratinski just a moment ago. We also see David Tangwe, one of the resident drivers at Malois Racing. We've seen them over on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series on the North American circuit. They are a fantastic driver to see on this grid today. We just see across the line a moment ago one of the GT3s, Benoit Alexaldo, where we saw him last time in Spa before our technical outages, and now we get to see the Frenchman once again behind the wheel of the 211. Also on this grid at the moment, Dion Helgelian. Of course, we've seen him to be a race winner in Season 3 of the Multi-Class Championship. Helgelian was incredibly strong in his time with Ford. We see him drop down to the GT4s for this special race and back where it all started for him with Chevrolet, the number 45 Camaro, on the exit of Turn 5. Logan Perry, we've seen a handful of appearances by this one. Now we get to see him behind the wheel of the number 25 Aston Martin V8 Vantage. And we see a lot of these times are starting to roll in very, very quickly indeed. So do forgive us if we get a little bit lost trying to talk about every single driver of this growing grid. We've seen across the line a moment ago, Alejandro Gonzalez, now fastest in the number 99. We see this is Kevin Pereira in the number 797 Mustang. Vincent Simard, of course, we saw them throughout the last couple of seasons on Competizione Performance League. And the number 120 was momentarily fourth fastest, now down to fifth, as we see HCCL resident driver Stephen Sutton in the number 7 Ford Mustang, now second fastest in this session. Going fastest then, another resident driver here on a HCCL is Pascal Stoltz. Now, we've seen the German talent before with Jaguar. To see him move over to more conventional choices at Ford represents a real push forward here. He's trying to put his best foot forward for this special event and looking for his chances of a GT3 class win. We also see here very strong competitor down in GT4. Keep a close eye on this one. Tom Breuer, the HCCL Carousel Cup champion. And the number 159 Alpine. A very bizarre choice indeed for him to have moved over to Alpine of all manufacturers with its titular 1.8 litre Renault Nissan Turbo inline 4 engine. It's the smallest engine in GT4. The GT4 is one such unique class that will tell you that size doesn't matter. The Alpine has had a sort of resolved history of punching up all the time. I mean, it goes as far back as its forefather, the 1969 to 1972 Alpine A110, in its time stomping around in the early days of the World Rally Championship. Now, its descendant competes in GT4 and Rally GT. Looking further around the grid here, we see Christian Lebay. That's the HCCL GT4 Challenge champion, as well as Season 2's GT4 class champion in the Multi-Class Championship. So a bit of HCCL royalty on this grid as well. Plenty of drivers still yet to show up, and we'll get through as many as we can throughout the session. Of course, we've seen Ratinsky before, and I believe we've seen Ratinsky to compete on the multi-class grid this season in Season 3. Catch on board here with the number 80 Alpine. And at this time, we're on board with Johnny Sodza. One of two Alpines on this grid. Now, I was pleasantly surprised to see that Renault was going to have a presence at all on today's grid, and they do via these two Alpines, one of which currently on the front row here in free practice, as Tom Breuer does drop down to second in division behind David Tanguay with Chevrolet. You see on the charts there another very recognizable name and a recognizable car to boot there, the Ginetta G55 number 818 of Tom Wells. Back on the grid once again. He's competed in the Multi-Class Championship and in the GT4 Challenge. And he does not shy away from a good time with the Ginetta, inseparable of that G55, and that seems to be no different in today's event. Also looking around the grid, we see Carl Martel from Maloir Racing. We've seen them quite a few times on a few different grids, whether it be the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series or the NLRL Sunday League. We've seen this one quite a few times before. This is a new driver on our radar. This is the number 380, Chris Egert Runkianen, the Estonian talent in the number 380 Porsche 718 Cayman. Wonderful colour scheme there as well, heading down towards Turn 2 at Crowthorns. You see here, this is the 777. Now, this is according to what they've declared on SimGrid. This is Vladimirator Malarex 7 in the 777 Aston Martin V8 Vantage. See here, quite a few of the GT3s out on track, still lapping, yet to put times in. Among them we can see is Mr. Scallops, but this one on screen at the moment is a new driver on our radar, Morris W2, the number 22 McLaren 720S. Of course, we've seen Mr. Scallops before, but rarely have we seen the Swedish talent to be behind the wheel of a Ferrari of all vehicles. He spent the majority of his time slugging things out with Nissan in the GTR R35 from 2017. This time, we do find him behind the wheel of the Ferrari 488, so not the 296 like most people would expect one to move over to. Much as we saw from Anthony Valorio throughout Season 3 of the Multi-Class Championship, the Ferrari 488 has proven to still be a competitive option on today's grid. We see up in the GT3 class here, just stuck in behind one of the Ferrari 296s that we'll get onto the discussion of in a moment's time. We see here the number 803, Julian Pereira. We saw Kevin Pereira a moment ago. This is Julian Pereira now behind the wheel of the 803 BMW on his way up towards Le Cop at turns 10 and 11. The car he just passed up there was the 666. Currently behind the wheel then is, just having a look here, Alexandra Albro in the number 666, that sort of dark ruby red Ferrari 296 on its way out through Mineshaft. You see as well here, now on board with another new driver on our radar. Taking a look here, this is just trying to pull up the data on all of this here. Not entirely sure. Here we go. Apologies there for the slight interruption, but there we go. So we're on board at the moment with Oliver Sueva in the number 19 McLaren 570S. Now, there are high hopes for McLaren in this event. Straight line speed is something they do have in the GT4 category, still on the close to manufacturer specification gear ratios of the road-going 570S, of which has a considerably larger amount of horsepower to boot than the GT4 offering. It was a significant downtune of the McLaren's 4-litre twin-turbo V8 engine to get it competitive for SRO GT4 regulations. We see as well Mateusz Blaszka, the number 33, on his way out through turn 16. We saw there in the background that, yes, is Morris W2. The Swiss driver turned around out through Cheetah Curve at turn 15. Now, we'll get a full tour of the track, hopefully by the end of free practice. If not, we'll have to wait for the advent of qualifying. We see there Morris bringing it to one side, and the number 22 is likely to be back into the pits, and there we do see it. See in the foreground there, very close to the cameras, that's Dion Helgelian's number 45. You see here, number 128, Sebastian Turner of NRW Performance. We've seen NRW quite a few times. In fact, we saw them just last night in the number 77 car. While we may not have seen Turner specifically, we have seen the team that he represents in this race, NRW Performance. We saw them last night in Imola. Stephen Black on the grid as well, number 707. You see here down in the GT4 category, another Porsche to add to a growing collection here. This is Thibaut Jassilias in the number 227. Anthony Valorio, of course, resident veteran of HCCL. One of its sort of key members. But now we see him, and we've seen a variety of cars, mind you, from Mr. Valorio over the last couple of months to almost nearly a year now working with HCCL. Quite a few different vehicles. This definitely does strike me as a unique one. We really had it in the back of our minds that it was going to be the Ferrari 488 again. But no, we do find him now moving to Aston Martin, of all manufacturers. Now, that is a curious one. We'll get on to how that's going to affect him over the course of the next couple of minutes here, whilst we continue to look through the rest of the grid. Another Porsche to add to the grid here, Vigo Vellas in the number 909. I believe we missed out on one of the drivers as we were scrolling through, because he's now put a time on the charts, and it's Antonio Cardoso. Now, just 2 days ago, we saw this Mercedes AMG cross the line first among the fray at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza in the opening round of 4 of the MSC GT3 Season 3. So a lot of high hopes here for the GT3 category with Cardoso on the grid. He's currently in behind Julian Pereira in 10th place, Pereira 9th. In this session so far. The leading fray then, we see here Pascal Stoltz leading the charge on his drive with Ford, and then Luca Foll in second place, and that also grants our first introductions with the 97 here. Foll second fastest by 677 thousandths of a second. Mr. Scallop's third, and Kevin Pereira in fourth. Rafael Bayer to round out the top 5 in GT3. Looking down to GT4 at the moment, Christian Lebay and David Tanguay lead it in a Chevrolet 1-2 charge for the Maloir Racing Team. Sebastian Turner third with Ginetta, Tom Breuer fourth with Alpine, and Matthias de Munster fifth with Mercedes AMG. Now, this is going to make a very curious double qualifying session coming up here. Of course, split down the middle for the GT3s and GT4s to have 10 minutes apiece to come out and play here on what is a fantastic circuit. So let's go and catch on board with some drivers about to make their way back on to the track here. I think we were just catching there with one of the McLarens, Luca Foll, if I'm not mistaken, just on his way down through. Oh no, he's coming into the pit lane. So, and we see there Morris brought to one side. So we are looking around. We have Mateusz Blaszka here in the number 33 on his way down through Ingwe Curve. So if all else fails, let's get on board then with the 33, who's set to become our tour guide here in Kyalami. Starting things off then, the very slight right-hander at turn 1 to bring us into Crowthorne's Corner, named after the Crowthorne's Hotel down here at turn 2. First of our major overtaking opportunities, you can see just how wide it is past the apex, and that gives us the prelude run up towards Juxgay Sweep turns 3 and 4, immediately into turn 5. So this whole first sector comes at you thick and fast. We've seen it to be a great melting pot for side-by-side action, no matter the category. And on our way now down towards Sunset Curve, still on board here with Mateusz Blaszka. Named after the fact drivers would be facing the sunset as they navigated the corner into Clubhouse. Named after the motorsporting clubhouse located at this area of the track. And on the run now down towards the S's, turn 8 and 9. We've seen this to be the Achilles heel for quite a few of the mid-engine cars, and for that reason, kicks up over the curbs. Very, very careful indeed. That sneaks up on you. It doesn't look like it's raised there, but it really, really is. Fortunately, Mateusz Blaszka didn't suffer any permanent damages there, nor did that car go careening into the wall, though we have seen it to be the case many, many times that a hit like that over the curb can easily do that to you. Out through Le Cop then in towards Mineshaft down at turn 12, one of the fastest sections of the track, and this is the build-up to another great overtaking spot here on the run in towards the heavy braking zone down at turn 13 at the Crocodiles. Very wide at the apex there, so it does facilitate some good side-by-side action for the GT3s. They'll see this as a great relief, as they'll have a great opportunity to lap around the GT4s. There won't be much of a hindrance to them over the course of the 2 hours 24 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, of racing to follow on from today. 144 minutes in total. To the line then, Blaszka out of Ingwe Curve. And it is a challenging circuit. We saw down at turn 15, not long before that, Cheetah Curve. Very much in the case like the S's, if you hit that inside curb, it is going to send the car flying, and I do not doubt the idea that we could be seeing that happen today. We see here now with Antonio Cardoso, with about 2 minutes left to go, we can get onto the topic just before the run into qualifying here to see what things are looking like in terms of balance of performance. Taking a look first with the GT3s, we can see that Lexus and Ferrari find themselves joint lightest in class, 34 kilos off of the RCF and the 488. McLaren losing 2 kilos and Lamborghini set to lose a single kilo. So not the end of the world for drivers like Rafael Bayer, who have chosen the Huracan GT3 Evo for this race. Into the dead neutral weight then is the Ferrari 296, so no gain and no loss there. That's dead level. So quite a few drivers to have picked the 296 will see no benefit, no loss. They'll just be able to handle the car as it comes from the factory. Porsche gaining 4 kilos, BMW gaining 7, Ford gaining 14. Here's the kicker, Aston Martin gaining 15. So for Anthony Valorio, who just moved over to Aston Martin, it has come at one of the worst times for him to do so. He'll have quite the hefty bit of weight added on to that V8 Vantage. Now, if we cut across here to take a look with some of the GT4s, we see here is Logan Perry, the number 25 into the pit lane, so I'll have to catch on with a different GT4 currently out on track at this time. We can see here with David Tanguay when we got on to the discussion of the GT4 balance of performance. And taking a look here, it's quite the mixed bag indeed. McLaren losing significant lumps of weight, Audi losing only 8 kilos, Alpine losing 4 despite being one of the lightest in class. And then we see the Aston Martin V8 Vantage losing a single kilo. We see here David Tanguay pulling it to one side, so we try to catch on board with some of the other drivers out on track. We see here on board with the likes of Chris Egert-Runkianen. Elsewhere in that discussion, Chevrolet dead level, Porsche gaining 11 kilos, Ginetta gaining 12, and Mercedes-AMG gaining 15 kilos. So quite heavy tolls there for ballast. You either have very small, minute changes in the negatives there, like you see with Audi, Alpine, and Aston Martin. You get no changes whatsoever like Chevrolet, or you get absolutely hammered down by balance of performance, such as the case for Porsche, Ginetta, and Mercedes. All right, at the very end then of this session here in free practice, not long from now, we're on to 20 minutes of qualifying. First 10 minutes, as per the regulations, taking a quick look back into it. First 10 minutes going over to the GT3s, last 10 minutes going over to the GT4s. We see here with Chris Egert-Runkianen on his way towards the line. Then the Estonian from 13th in division. Crossed the line there on that last lap, stays 13th after 7 laps. Told in free practice. We do see a few more drivers waiting to get down to the line. The 159 among them there we see with Tom Breuer with Alpine. A very vivid paint job on that A110. Down through Ingray Curve. 4th in division at the moment, 21st of a 34-car grid. Breuer down to the line. Can he find an improvement? Yes, it's up to division 2nd for Alpine. So there is great chances here for Alpine to see some solid results in GT4. A rare sight indeed, but in the hands of a driver like Tom Breuer, there is hope yet still for the A110. Taking a look there, fastest at the end of free practice, Pascal Stoltz in the GT3 category, and in GT4, it's Christian Lebay. So 20 minutes of qualifying underway. First up then, the GT3s. Let's go and catch on board with the GT3s on their way out. We can see side rolling formation for the two Fords for a moment's time. That was Stephen Sutton and Pascal Stoltz. We see charging out the fray there is Stoltz. But I believe just a little further up the road, yes, it's Alejandro Gonzalez in the number 99. He'll be first into the fray. Sadly, no qualifying data to go off of. Not enough to comprise a comprehensive look at the top 10 across both categories. So we're going into this one absolutely blind. So very high hopes coming out of that free practice session for Pascal Stoltz at that time. Ford definitely look to be wowing in spite of that heavy balance of performance ballast on their car. 2nd heaviest in terms of the changes for this grid of GTs. You see just looming in the background there, the twin Fords of Stoltz and Sutton. We're on board though with the leading car for the GT3s. Will be first onto the flying laps, the number 99 of Gonzalez. See then Gonzalez trying to put some heat in the tyres. The Spaniard already getting himself accustomed to those Pirellis, knowing that he's only got about 8.5 minutes to make do with what he has here before the GT4s come out and play here in this qualifying session. Of course, to remind you in the chat at the moment, this is a charity race for St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. You'll find there in the description the donation link to contribute to this charity. Of course, we'll get back onto the discussion of the charity statement in just a moment's time after this qualifying session. Sadly, we can't cut away as otherwise it will reset all of our timing equipment, but you'll find in the Twitch chat the donation link. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll find it in the description of the video. And while not necessary to have entered this event, we do ask that you spread the word around for such a charitable cause. On board then with the 99 as we begin those flying laps. He's already out through barbecue. Let's run in towards Sunset Corner. Now, there's high hopes for Ferrari as well. We know that Ferrari can be a very solid manufacturer to be here in South Africa. Corner intensive track as well, very tight, very twisting in that middle sector. So a car like the Ferrari 296 that has very solid poke on corner entry. Definitely one of the better mixes we've seen in the last couple of months. Out through the S's then, still on board with Alejandro Gonzalez. The 99 on his way in towards Leeuwenhoek corner. You can see behind him Pascal Stoltz actually closing the gap up a little bit. So that does raise some questions here on whether or not Ferrari can hold a candle to Ford in the GT3 qualifying. We're still on board then with Gonzalez on the run down towards turn 12. Getting a driver's eye view of things out through turn 12 gives us a little bit of a better perspective as to how much space there is to play with here in the Crocodiles. This is one of the best overtaking opportunities on track. You can see it comes over a little bit of a light crest, then into a dip, then into another crest on the run in towards Cheetah Curve. You can see that yellow curve there, and it's been sort of rubbed down there with the sort of residue rubber of several dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of tyres clattering with that section. But you can still very distinctly see that sausage curve to be great trouble. Then across the line, 141.240 by Gonzalez. How does that rank up against the rest of GT3? We see here Pascal Stoltz off by 0.04 of a second. Sutton third, Scallops fourth. We see Luca Foll up to third. We see in the background there coming to the line, that's Pereira, Kevin Pereira, now behind Julian Pereira. Actually, sorry, Julian Pereira ahead of Kevin Pereira. That's who we were trying to see. We're going to get that one confused in a vacuum at some point. Coming to the line then, next wad of cars, among them the 22 we saw. That's Morris W across the line, 9th in the session so far. Meanwhile, Matthias Blaschka up to 3rd. Archie Hebden in 4th place with Ferrari, the number 15 across the line. and ahead of Luca Foll. See ahead of him there by 47 thousandths of a second. That's 407 thousandths if we want to get specific. And then you look at the gap between himself and Mateusz Blaszka on that second row, and you're talking a gap of 105 thousandths, a tenth and 5 thousandths in that sense. You see across the line was Anthony Valorio with Aston Martin's 7th fastest after his first flying lap, only off of the nearest time to him, that being Stephen Sutton on the back of the 3rd row by 800ths of a second. Next to the line then, the 99, Gonzalez. Driver who started this session off. We see him about to lay in his 2nd flying lap. Bear in mind, time's running short here for the GT3s. You don't realise how quickly it creeps up on you. When you see the timer at the top of the screen there, you still think, well, there's quite a lot of time left. In terms of relative times here, it's only about 4.5 minutes left for the GT3s. Across the line, an extension over his fastest. What's the rebuttal then by Pascal Stoltz? It's fastest by 3/10 there for Stoltz. Sutton 3rd. From behind him there, we see Mr. Scallops 4th with Ferrari. Coming to the line from behind them, Luca Foll up to 6th. We see in the background there, coming to the line, Julian Pereira from 11th and stays in 11th there. Still separate from Cardoso now by 200ths of a second. 28 across the line a moment ago, and I believe that was, yes, for an improvement there. Rafael Bayer with Lamborghini and Black Nitro Racing to 8th place. Now up and ahead of Anthony Valorio, pushes Antonio Cardoso to the back of the top 10. 33 was across the line a moment ago as well. Following in their trails was the 211. In terms of the 33, Mateusz Blaszka in the top 5 at the moment. Really not too far away at all there from Mr. Scallops in 4th place. The gap to be on the 2nd row between these two, doing the rough maths here, is about 7 thousandths of a second. So very fine gaps here we see. We can see 17 thousandths of a second here just outside of the 3rd row into the 4th between Archie Hebden in the number 15 and Luca Foll in the number 97. We do see, and this is a curious sight indeed, and I think we have a little bit of a lost driver here, a sighting lap gone awry for Sebastian Turner. I mean, he was out on track for just a moment, a bit of a sightseeing tour for the Ginetta. Cheeky. I'm pretty sure the stewards aren't going to be particularly pleased to have seen the Ginetta wandering about before it's allowed to. 3 minutes before he gets the opportunity, if we can get the T's out today. Kevin Pereira currently in the back of the GT3 field. Now, bear in mind, we still have 1 or 2 drivers. In fact, it's just the one yet to have come out to do any times, and that's Stephen Black in the number 707 BMW, remains in the pit lane. Rather curious sight indeed. In the meantime, we've seen Mr. Scallops advance to 3rd, now on the 2nd row. And I just said that as Rafael Bayer crossed the line, now up and ahead of Mr. Scallops' Lamborghini on the 2nd row of this grid. With 2 minutes, 20 seconds left to go. This is going to be rather curious to see. The front row still separate by less than a tenth of a second. Pascal Stoltz in 2nd, Alejandro Gonzalez in 1st. We've really seen the Spaniard come alive in qualifying here with that Ferrari. The chances of them going toe-to-toe with Ford, we said were up in the air. We're looking rather slim, perhaps, we were suggesting. But we can see here in the hands of Gonzalez, he has made well above and beyond what we were expecting of Ferrari today. That 296 is on fire here in Kyalami. Coming to the line next, the number 120, Vincent Simard with Malwal Racing Lexus from 9th place on the grid, stays there behind Archie Hebden for the time being. The number 707, if I'm not mistaken, is that the 797? It's the 797. That's Kevin Pereira on his way to the line. Across the line he goes up to 11th, so a sizable leap there for Pereira, now up and ahead of Julian Pereira. So the two Pereiras head-to-head here, just outside of the top 10 for GT3. Meanwhile, I think we're about to see here yes, the number 97 coming to the line, Luca Foll, just on the exit of Ingwe Curb. Up the road we saw was Mr. Scallops, stays in 4th for the time being, reluctantly so, as we cross into the final minutes of qualifying for the GT3s. The next 10 minutes coming up will be for the GT4s to come out and play on track. High hopes here for Chevrolet to take pole position. Christian Lebay, we've seen as a veteran to GT4. He is very, very well educated when it comes to the GT4s. He knows them inside and out, and that Chevrolet has proven to be an unstoppable pairing here on HCCL back in the GT4 Challenge. Hebden across the line, separated from Matthias Blaschke by 105 thousandths. By the looks of it there for the number 15, he calls it quits on this one. And at the best of times, settles for a 4th row start. 8th place for the number 15. We'll see if there can be any rebuttal from the cars around him. First among the fray, then in towards that. Anthony Valorio just at the back of the top 10 for Aston Martin as he crosses the line here. Technically does have enough time for one more flying lap. We'll see whether or not he chooses to take that. It is an improvement from his current time, but not enough for position. Meanwhile, it's a leap there for Vincent Simard. The 120, as you can see now, a lot of traffic in the pit lane as the GT4s are released. We see first among the fray, by looks of it there, is Logan Perry, then Matthias de Munster on his trails in the AMG. As we see in the background is Kevin Pereira. Now splitting the two Pereiras, I should point out, right at the very end of GT3's qualifying. Oh my goodness gracious me. Very, very cheeky there. You can see Matthias de Munster not happy whatsoever. You can see splitting the two Pereiras at the end of GT3's qualifying is Benoit Alexander across the line a moment ago. Luca Fall right at the very end of his qualifying endeavours. 5th place, up and ahead of Vincent Simard, now relegated to the 3rd row. Or the back of the 3rd row, I should say. So at the bottom line of it all, as we wait for the start of the GT4 flying laps, we'll be catching on board in a moment time with the 25 of Logan Perry. Following on his trails, the number 3 of Matthias de Munster. But leading in the GT3 qualifying then at the end of their qualifying session, Alejandro Gonzalez with Pascal Stoltz 2nd, Rafael Bayer 3rd, and Mr. Scallops 4th, rounding out that top 5, Luca Foll. That's 5 different cars, admittedly 2 of which from the same manufacturer, but you see there, old and new, the 488 and its replacement, the 296, in the same scope of the top 5. So let's go and catch on board now with the number 25 here. We're going to go and look for that of Logan Perry. We see quite the ensemble of cars now, and we see the 119, that's Christian Lebay, just up the road from Kevin Pereira. Ford and Chevrolet clashing in ways I don't think they were expecting to. As we see, Pereira stays out. This is a curious one. We had drivers wondering about on track before, where it's such a case that now it's bled over into the next session. So we see Lebay starting a flying lap. So in the time since, Lebay has come up and gone past that of Logan Perry and that of, taking a look here, Matthias de Munster. So was it a case that he always had done that and was very early out of the gates? Regardless of it, we'll stay on board then with the 119, Christian Lebay. And this is actually quite good for us here because I think, yes, we are actually able to use the graphics we made over on the not GT4, sorry, on the multi-class championship. You see here with Lebay on his way out through Clubhouse on the way in towards the S's. You can see how hard the Chevrolet's listing there through the corners. It's really a case you've got to start using naval terminology to describe this monstrously large GT4. Now, we spoke earlier about the Alpine A110 of Tom Breuer. We'll be keeping an eye for that one over the course of the next 6 or so minutes in this session. But we spoke about it having the smallest engine. Conversely, you're looking here at the largest engine of GT4, 6.2 litre Chevrolet LT1 naturally aspirated V8 engine. Co-engineered then by the folks at Pratt Miller Engineering, the same head boffins behind the Corvette C7, C6 and C8 are in the world of GT racing. So in towards Ingwe Curve, Lebay to be the first time by looks of it here into the GT4 category. So we'll see where they rank up here. We'll actually wait to see what the time is specifically from Lebay as he crosses the line on 151.045, our benchmark in this session. Coming to the line from behind him then, Logan Perry And on his trails as well, Matthias de Munster. So the Aston Martin down to the line, provisionally second. We'll see where that ranks up as Matthias de Munster takes second. We see Stephen Black in the background there, coming out with the GT4s. Is he perhaps a little bit confused of which category he entered in? Meanwhile, taking the fastest time, and this does come as quite a shock, double fastest time there, because it was once in the hands of Tom Wells. Now it's in the hand of another Chevrolet, David Tanguay. Bear in mind, this is quite heavy when we take a look into the top three here. Tom Wells in a land of giants in that titular Ginetta. I think 3.7 litre, 3.6 litre Ford Cyclone V6 engine. Now, it may not be as titular as the Alpine that has just gone second fastest, Tom Breuer, with his 1.8 litre unit. But he is still working up against engines nearly twice his size with that 6.2 litre. We see Lebay now third. Carl Martel, another Malwar Racing Chevrolet, in that top five at the moment. Fifth place in division as it stands right now, but leading that charge, the number 30 of Tanguay. This is quite heavy when you consider the fact that David Tanguay, and for that matter as well, when we take a look to Christian Lebay, both of these two are world record holders in GT4 in those two Chevrolets. So for Tom Breuer and Tom Wells, the two Toms in the smaller cars of this variety, to be intercepting these two, splitting the seas as it were, with Alpine and Ginetta, does stand as quite a heavy precedent to be found, ironically, for some of the lightest cars in GT4. 4.5 minutes left to go then. Wells third, Breuer second, and Tanguay in the lead of GT4's qualifying. Now, we're about to see the 119 down towards the line again. What can Lebay do after that last lap? Up to fastest, and immediately back into the charge of things by just under a tenth of a second. Logan Perry coming to the line, and just behind him there we see Matthias de Munster. We now see Munster in the... de Munster, I should say, in fifth. Behind Tom Wells and Tom Breuer. We also see another one of the Alpines now onto the timing charts just from behind Dion Helge-Lien, who now goes up and ahead of him. We see here with Sulzer in the number 80. Johnny Sulzer in the Alpine A110. Wonderful colour scheme there as well. So, looking at the session so far, this has become quite an odd split when you take a look at it for the GT4s, because up at the front of the pack here, on that GT4 front row, we did find, as we now see, the battle of David and Goliath, as Tom Breuer takes fastest with 3.5 minutes left to go. So, it's very hard to keep track of this all at the same time, because now we see Alpine punching up at Chevrolet. Never had I thought in my time commentating for GT4 I'd ever see the day that Alpine, a 1.8 litre unit, thwarts a 6.2 litre juggernaut like the Chevrolet Camaro. But that is the beauty of GT4. Far more diverse than the GT3s. You do really get your David and Goliath stories. We see here in the story of two up at the front of the GT4s. Meanwhile, we see up the road from them, Stephen Black finally puts a time on the charts. He finds himself behind Ryan Chaparentier-Roulants in 18th place in GT3. Lebay to the line. Can he retake pole away from Breuer? Across the line he goes. Not this time around. Those two separated by 25 thousandths at the front of the field. And then it's just less than a tenth between Lebay and Tanguay. So looking at things at the moment, now this is subject to change. We see Breuer fastest, Lebay second, Tanguay third, Wells fourth, Turner fifth. Two Ginettas in the top five, and Alpine leading ahead of two Chevrolets. This is madness here in Kyalami. This is, by and large, one of the most bizarre grids I think I've ever seen for GT4 racing. You see here with Turner down towards the line. Can he go faster than his fellow Ginetta? Not on this lap, and he is coming up on his last available opportunities to try and fight with Tom Wells. He currently finds himself backed up behind Matthias de Munster's Mercedes. However, this is actually working to Wells's favour. Straight line speed is not a very good strength of the Ginetta. Oh my goodness, contact between the pair out through turn 6. Getting elbows out already, and the race has not even started. Things are already getting very, very lively down in GT4. Nearest the line then, the 119. Actually, no, that's a mistake on our end. It was the one... Not even a 1, actually. 380. I need to get my eyes checked. Chris Eggert Runkianen. The Estonian currently down in what looks to be their Division 9th. Crossing into that final minute, not far from now. The 119 coming out through turn 15. We see here with Christian Labay hunting down pole position off of Alpine. This is a real David and Goliath story here. Chevrolet versus Alpine. Lansing, Michigan versus Dieppe, France. Down towards the line then, here comes the Chevrolet. What can it do on what looks to be its penultimate lap of qualifying? No advance to pole there, not even an improvement over personal best for Labay. The Chevrolet has found its limits and the Alpine has just snuck in above it by a couple thousandths of a second. Coming to the line, the 818. Now, we saw their contact before, so it's unlikely that we'll see an improvement in this last lap just gone. Fortunately, with enough time for one more flying lap, Tom Wells has the chance to advance up towards potentially the front of that second row here. Nearest target in sight, David Tangway, currently Division 3rd in the number 30 Chevrolet Camaro. Coming to the line from behind them, Carl Martel, just at the very end of qualifying, so beaten by the bell. Same story for Johnny Sosa with Alpine. Across the line there, Martel stays 25th overall in terms of division rankings, as we see Tom Breuer just up the road there, having put the gap over Labay by a 1/10 of a second right at the very end of GT4's qualifying. I mean, you've got to hand it there to Tom Breuer. I did not expect that coming out of Alpine today. Now, of course, session is still not yet over. There is the chances in this final lap that Labay could find a 1/10 of a second. We have seen the Canadian talent do a lot more with a lot less in GT4 qualifying. But has it been the case where that Camaro has found its hard ceiling up against the 159 Alpine? Well, we're about to find out. In towards the Crocodiles we go. Turn 13, now turn 14 coming up in a moment's time for the 119. In through to turn 15 at Cheetah Curve. In towards Ingwe, turn 16 now on the run in towards the line. What can the 119 do? Needs to find a whole 1/10 of a second here over the Alpine and then some for division pole. Can he find it on this last lap? Sadly, not the case for Chevrolet. They start upon the front row in a very bizarre matchup against Alpine. Of all manufacturers, I did not have that one in the back pocket to see Alpine onto pole position. Believe it or not then, it's in the hands of the 159, Tom Breuer. Previously cited as the GT3 and GT4, if I'm not mistaken, winner in the Carousel Cup. Meanwhile, we see there for Tom Wells, Division 4th, very solid qualifying for the Brit in the 818. He starts up and ahead of Sebastian Turner. We'll get a full look of that grid in a moment's time. But before we get to that, we have a section on the news. And we also have the informative bit about St. Jude's Children's Hospital to just remind you of what this special event is in charitable cause for. Starting things off then, just briefly, the talk of the news. And one of the most recent bits of news to have come across our desk has come from the World Rally Championship. After the last stage ran this morning, the 94th running of the Monte Carlo Rally and the first round of the 2026 World Rally Championship is won by the number 99 of Oliver Solberg and Elliot Edmondson. On their first full-time drive for Toyota Gazoo Racing in Rally 1, this has been a sensational opening performance for his 2026 title charge. The son of 2003 World Rally champion Petter Solberg rejoins the grid proper after a hiatus from the top end of World Rallying and kicks things off with a sensational performance with Toyota. Some of the most iconic moments already coming out of his performance in one of the most challenging Monte Carlo rallies we've seen in recent years. Possibly the most difficult for the Rally 1s, as it came out in the third day, in the final day of that rally, where even Rally 3 cars, so 2 divisions down, were going faster than the Rally 1s in the challenging conditions. It was a very solid performance then by Solberg. A minute to go then before the formation lap, and we'll take a look at the grid and then onto the charitable cause section, talking more about St. Jude's Children's Hospital before we get on towards this race. Then 2.4 hours here in Kyalami. Starting things off then, the GT3 grid. Gonzalez in first, Stoltz second by a third, Scallops fourth, and Foal makes the top 5 on the third row alongside him. Then Simard in 6th. In 7th, we have Sutton, Blaschke 8th, Hebden 9th, Valorio 10th, Pereira, that being Kevin Pereira in 11th, Benoit Alexalde in 12th, and Julian Pereira in 13th, Antonio Cardoso in 14th, Morris W2 in 15th, Adbro 16th, Chaperontier Roulant 17th, and Stephen Black rounds out the GT3 grid in 18th. In GT4s then, pole position for division for Tom Breuer, 2nd for LeBay, 3rd for Tanguay, Wells 4th, and Turner rounds out the top 5. Martel 6th, Helgalian in 7th, Runkianen in 8th, Sodsa 9th, Jasalias in 10th, Perry 11th, Ratinsky 12th, Malarex in 13th, Swaver in 14th, Veyers in 15th, and Matthias de Munster starts at the back of GT4 and the grid outright. Several pit lane starts then coming up almost immediately, first of which for Anthony Valorio was set to start 10th, Julian Pereira set to start 13th, and then down in the GT4s, Logan Perry in the number 25 Aston Martin. We take a look then back towards the front of the field here. Let's go and catch on board with the front row. We see Pascal Stoltz in the 172 Mustang, but leading that charge. Let's go to catch on board with the Ferrari, leading this charge then for 2.4 hours here in Kyalami. And during this formation lap, let's just quickly touch back in on the session format, and also just a brief note as well about St. Jude's Children's Hospital. For those of you tuning in on Twitch chat, you'll have seen the donation link in the Twitch chat just now, and we'll paste it back in for the sake of timekeeping as well for those of you just joining. You can see here in the session 144 minutes of racing to follow, 2 hours 24 minutes start to finish, 2 mandatory pit stops for fuel and tyres coming up. Now, in terms of what this race is all about St. Jude's Children's Hospital, St. Jude is a non-profit organisation that helps children in need of treatment for cancer, blood disorders, neurological disorders, infectious diseases or other catastrophic childhood conditions, while not charging the family a bill so that they can focus on what matters the most. 89% of St. Jude's funding comes from donations, which is what makes all of this possible. No entry fee or donation is required to have entered this event, but we are asking if you are willing to spread the word by sharing this broadcast and the donation link for the event you'll find in either the YouTube description or in the Twitch chat for those of you tuning in live today, to help bring support to such a great cause. So bringing us back into the here and now during this formation lap, we're on our way down through the S's on board at the moment with the pole sitter, both outright and in GT3, Alejandro Gonzalez. He'll be starting up and alongside Pascal Stoltz. Rafael Bayer very close in company there, starts alongside Mr. Scallops, the defending multi-class champion, but now driving for Ferrari. So this is going to get rather interesting then, folks. On the way in through to turn 12, 2 grids to focus on here. So for the first time, we'll be... Actually, no, we can't, sadly, start the race from looking at the sort of main grid views where we can snap between the two. So we're going to have to sort of scope out where can we see on board with from the front lines of both fights as quickly as possible. Okay, we've got a pretty decent chance of it here. Now, I do apologise for the rather crude menu navigation. That's not really on our end. It's just the way that the game structures the menu navigation. Very strange. Not much we can do with that. Down towards Ingwe Curve then, on what is set to be a monumental event here for a charitable cause. This one special event here, 2.4 hours to follow here in Kyalami. Pardon me. Down towards the line then from Ingwe Curve. Quite a few cars from the pit lane today, but 34 in all across GT3 and GT4. Down towards the line then, leading the charge, Gonzalez from Stoltz. Without further ado, the HCCL Race for Children, 2.4 hours of Kyalami is underway, and a great start from the front row then by Gonzalez to immediately cover off an advance around the outside by Pascal Stoltz. Meanwhile, a brilliant charge right off the bat here for Rafael Bayer. A brilliant start by Lamborghini. You can see there, hooking up the inside. That looked to have been Luca Full. Sadly, couldn't find any ground of it. Meanwhile, Rafael Bayer looks to go head-to-head with Pascal Stoltz immediately for second place. Meanwhile, yellow flags are out. Serious catastrophe down the order there. As we see, this is David Tanguay's point of view, navigating the crowd. Tom Breuer now behind him. The man who started from pole in GT4 drops down to Division 3rd as LeBay leads the charge. Tanguay up to second. Immediate trouble then, as we're back into green flag conditions for the time being, down through the Crowthorns and then up through the Juxgay sweep for the first time. We see in the background there side-by-side action between Helgalian and Wells. Ginetta versus Chevrolet down at the back of the division top 5. Meanwhile, looking back up towards the front row, Gonzalez takes the charge up and away here from Pascal Stoltz. Rafael Bayer third, Mr. Scallops in fourth. Taking a look at the grid at the moment, we see that Turner has been brought back into the grid here, back into the pit lane, I should say, as there looks to be the first of our possible DNFs from the number 128 Ginetta. Started in that top 5, was caught up in that wave of casualties on the starting lap. We saw even GT3s were caught up in the mix of things there. I believe we saw for about a time the 111 of Cardoso with Mercedes AMG. We see here leading the charge after the first lap. Gonzalez from Stoltz, I should point out as well, the German is getting much, much closer, where it wasn't the most enthusiastic of starts by Ford to go toe-to-toe with Ferrari. Normally a territory they can cover off quite nicely. It was up until this lap here where he started to bring the gap back in. On his way down towards Crowthorns, we see in the background then Bayer in third, Scallops challenging on the second row, Hebden in fifth. We see Luca Full in sixth place. I just want to point this one out, looking briefly back up towards that front row as we see just how close things are willing to get. Quickly taking a look back behind them on the run through the Juxgay sweep here with Vincent Simard challenging Luca Full for sixth place, Matthias Blaschke in eighth place, Kevin Pereira in ninth, but looks to have fallen in behind Stephen Sutton here, who now moves up to a potential 9th place. Benoit Alexander drops down to 11th. Abro in 12th. Right behind him there, you can see is on your screens at the moment the 22 of Morris W2, the Swiss talent. Because you can see up the road from there, Pereira side by side with Abro. Just up the road from them, we are starting to see the beginning of some serious action here up in that top 5. First among them, we can see at this time Rafael Bayer versus Mr. Scallops. Just in front of them, you can still see raging on from the front row of the GT3s is Stoltz v Gonzalez. Not to take away from what's going on in GT3 at this time. Looking down into the GT4s, we see the two Chevrolets continuing the charge up through the line here. LeBay from Tanguay in a defense of the podium positions away from the Alpine. David and Goliath here. Alpine A110 meets Chevrolet Camaro. Right behind them then, another featherweight of GT4, the Ginetta G55, driven by Tom Wells. Dion Helgalian up into the top 5. You can see behind him there, that's his Antonio Cardoso. So one of the casualties of GT3 caught up in that first lap calamity down through the Juxgay sweep is actually being challenged for position by Dion Helgalian's GT4. Bear in mind, there's a fight for the GT3s there. Minor contact between Julian Pereira and Antonio Cardoso, and he turns him around down at turn 15. Even more contact between the two GT3s. The GT4s having to scramble their way around. We see one of the GT3s in there as well, the 41 of Anthony Valorio. It is bedlam here in South Africa. Very, very bizarre state of affairs we're seeing here across both categories. Two worlds collide here in Kyalami. Looking back into the fight of the GT4 lead, we see here it is still Three's company, two Chevrolets and an Alpine, soon to be two Chevrolets, an Alpine and a Ginetta for that matter. We see in the background, actually, if I'm not mistaken, no, was not who I thought it was there. In fact, it was this one here, Ryan Charpentier-Roulans, the Emile Frey Racing 296 number 2, currently sandwiched in between the GT4s. Thibaut Dresseliers in the number 227, then up over the nose of Charpentier-Roulans at this time, Tom Wells. As now he gets up and around Dion Helgalian out through Sunset in towards Clubhouse. We see there the GT4's really tightly packed in, two Porsches. Chris Eggert Runkianen caught between a rock and a hard place here. Dresseliers over his nose. Matthias de Munster over his rear. We see in the background there running out wide. That was Vigo Veyes in the 909. Big, big trouble. Nearly an incident there for the number 909. His fellow Porsches, though, really getting into the scrum of things in GT4. Now, we don't want to take away from what's going on up the line here in the front of the pack for GT4. Moreover, in GT3 as well, we can see the current state of affairs on that front row. Stoltz now separating from Gonzalez. The Spaniard continuing the charge now, 1.1 seconds clear of the German in second place. Rafael Bayer makes third at the moment. Very closely engaged there by the Ferrari of Mr. Scallops. Archie Hebden looks to make that Three's company in his 296, number 15. Right behind them, ongoing fight here on the third row between two McLarens, Luca Foll and Matthias Blaschke. Cameras not being the most cooperative here to follow the cars up through the Juxgay sweep, struggling to track, but now on the exit of turn 5.
See them on the run in towards turn 6 at the moment. Ongoing fights throughout the field then in GT3. Quickly cutting back to our scope of things in the GT4s. We see Ryan Charpentier-Roulance now splitting the tide here in GT4 and his GT3 that was caught up in that earlier incident. Very bizarre visual then for Tom Breuer, as he could use this to his gain here, and that he does. Out through turn 5, it's 3 abreast, 2 GT4s and a GT3 on the run in towards turn 6. The Chevrolet has enough top end, but trying to go around the outside. The number 172, no, not that, sorry, 159, 172 is Pascal Stoltz, my mistake. The 159 of Tom Breuer was around the outside at turn 6, is up the inside on turn 7. The Alpine gets the leg up on the Chevrolet, moves up to division 2nd. Tom Wells fancies his chances as well. He's up onto the podium in GT4 in the Ginetta, the land of the featherweights, clearly here in Midrand, South Africa. What a bizarre visual we are seeing and are gifted today in this very, very special race indeed. You see there, that's the forefront of the GT4 field. That's Christian Lebay in the 119. Now very little to stand between him and Tom Breuer. We just see there Ryan Charpentier-Roulance, the number 2 Ferrari 296 that's been carving his way through this field for the time being. Now getting clear of the front row. Now into lapsed traffic there. As you can see, that's Maximilian Ratinsky up over his nose in the AMG. Looking at some of the closer fights in GT3 just briefly here. 0.6 of a second at the last interval between Foal and Blasker. Monitoring the situation as well between Scallops and Bayer on that second row fight. Something to point out as well in the last couple of laps. New fastest lap by Pascal Stoltz, the 172, whom of which we had the number mixed up with the 159 of Tom Breuer. But they are 2 sensational German talents on this field. Both of which now gunning in their division 2nd place. Half a second at the last interval between Gonzalez and Stoltz. There is the chances here of these two fighting once again for the race lead. We see in the fight down in 6th place, Foal v Blasker, potentially to kick off into a 3-way fight for the top 5. Archie Hebden starts to lag behind that of Mr. Scallops. Was on for a moment there to fight with Scallops and Bayer for a podium position in the early parts of today's race. We see here for Hebden, he is being intercepted by Luca Foals, number 97. Up through turn 13. In towards turn 40, the chances are definitely there for Foal to attack in the near future. We'll see exactly when he chooses to take that chance. So you see the McLaren is gaining on that Ferrari. And being in the slipstream down the opening straight, even in a car that to boot has slightly better top end, this could prove to be quite a compelling sign here for Luca Foal. Bear in mind, he's still got present company behind him there, that being Matthias Blasker and the number 33. So, diverting back down towards the GT4s for a moment, we see the story of the podium so far. Tom Breuer in 2nd place. Christian Lebay in the lead of the GT4 wing at this time. And the 119 had a brilliant start to things here in South Africa. You can see behind him there, gaining ground, is the 159 of Breuer. Then in 3rd place after getting up and around David Tanguay has been that of Tom Wells. But let's not say that he's entirely out of the woods there. You can see Tanguay right on his trails at this time. And this is going to be the most vulnerable spot to be in that Ginetta. Top end is just not the G55's forte. Super short ratio gearbox there. Almost rally-esque. Of course, came from the world of cup racing. One of the oldest, if not the oldest cars in circulation here in GT4. Was introduced in 2011, some 15 years ago. Was originally a single-make cup racer, the bigger and badder brother of the Ginetta G40 Junior. In fact, if my memory serves me correctly, if I'm not mistaken, at one point in history, the G55, it might have been perhaps a slightly later model, did actually see very brief action in GT3. So it's a versatile platform here that they developed in Ginetta's headquarters in Leeds with this very unique little motor. Really is quite a pleasure to see these things race as well. If you ever get the opportunity to go down to a track and they've got Ginettas on the run, you're not likely to find them in, I don't think you'll find them in North America. They're a bit harder to come across. Very odd, bizarre little vehicle. But if you're ever in the UK out for a race day and they've got the Ginettas, keep your eyes glued to the track. These are an absolute riot to watch. You see, recent move for position then As Luca Foll drops down the order quite dramatically there. He was in the fight with Mateusz Blaszka, but drops down to 12th place, now stuck in behind Alexandra Abro in the number 666. Has a little bit of upset through turn 2 in that Ferrari, up through the Juxgay sweep. We're left to question what happened then whilst we were studying the GT4s. What exactly happened for Luca Foll? But I think already back on the revenge drive. Abro v Foll for 11th place. Foll around the outside, Abro on the inside. Here at turn 6, now we've already seen stability issues to be a creeping factor on that 666. That's going to play a heavy hand in getting the 97 off of his trails here, because for the 97, he has to consider there is a great risk now getting side by side with a car that is very clearly starting to lose control. Out through the S's. Can the 666 tidy things up through sector 2 and 3 to keep himself in the fight here? 11th place for Alexandra Abro. Meanwhile, just taking a look up at the front of the field here, we do see things are still very close by between Gonzalez and Stoltz. Previous intervals showed a gap of 9 tenths of a second and 3 hundredths. And at the last interval there, I'm not so convinced. It's actually, yes, advanced to 1.050 seconds. There's 2 seconds now between Bayer and Scallops. You've got to hand it here to Rafael Bayer. He's really come into his own with Lamborghini. Now, we've seen limited performance by Lamborghini here in South Africa. Last driver to have taken to the track in the Huracan was Tyler Vermaak in the trailing end of Season 4, the NLRL Sunday League. A very confusing time to see Lamborghini on track right towards the very end. It was one of several testing runs for the South African talent at his home race, and that delivered a mixed bag of results. In the hands of Bayer at the moment, though, it's very smooth and steady in the number 28 at this time. You see, the front row is starting to advance. Now, last interval was a second as they started lap 7, but now it drops to within 3/4 of a second. So the chances are absolutely there. Meanwhile, down the line, much closer gap to be studied here for 8th place, Simard v Pereira. Pereira looking up the inside on Vincent Simard, down through to turn 7. Kevin Pereira goes up the inside for 8th place and takes it by force. Great move there by Pereira. Very well telegraphed. Not a lot of issues there in terms of the drivers coordinating themselves. Nice, neat and tidy move then. The battle of the V8s then. 5.4 litres from 7th all the way to 9th here with Stephen Sutton up front of them. Pereira, of course, also in the same Mustang, but funnily enough, another 5.4 litre unit, not the same as the one found in that Mustang, can be found under the bonnet of that Lexus RCF. Looking back then to the study of the GT4s, we see that the gap is still fairly close between the leading pair. Christian Lebay still at the forefront of the charge for GT4. Tom Breuer, who started from pole, drops down to second, has fought his way back up through the podium, however, against David Tangwe. Finds himself 1.2 seconds at the last interval there. Closer gaps yet still between Wells and Tangwe inside of that top 5. Matthias de Munster in the top 5 as well. We see there, that's Julian Pereira getting up and around him. He's slowly making his way up through the field after an issue from earlier on. Of course, we did see an incident not too long ago down at turn 15. In the pit lane at the moment, Logan Perry and Carl Martel, 2 GT4s potentially out of action here, or could it be the start of a very early run of pit stops? We see that Martel has already taken a mandatory pit stop, so that was fuel and tyres on that Chevrolet, the number 999. We see Bayer and his contemporaries in the top 3 have already started to run into traffic here. So for Gonzalez, this is going to be a curious one to see indeed. Looking here with Pereira v Sutton. Now, I think we're going to go and catch on board, as a matter of fact, with Kevin Pereira, because he had a great move over Vincent Simard. I'm curious to see then, what can the 797 do next, now going toe-to-toe on equal grounds up against another 7th generation Ford Mustang. Well, we stay on board then for the fight of 7th. Bear in mind, Vincent Simard is really not too far away at all. One slip and he's with them. The 227 up in front brings the yellow flags out, so caution up ahead on the run in towards turn 15. Still on board with Kevin Pereira and Stephen Sutton. You can see there's the aftermath of the incident there. One of the GT4s had trouble down through Cheetah Curve. And that was Thibaut Jesseliers in the 227 Porsche that had trouble down at turn 15. Then both of them are going to have to navigate that wounded Porsche on the way in towards turn 2. Super late on the brakes then for Kevin Pereira. You got to hand it to him here. He's had an ecstatic performance so far. We're not 25 minutes into this race, or 24 minutes, I should say, before we get to 2 hours left. A sensational start to things here in South Africa. A lot of action, not a lot of time having been covered. We stay on with these two to take a look around the field once again. Very wide out behind them there. Vincent Simard trying to get up and around the McLaren down in GT4. At the time, he was getting up and around Oliver Sueva. So at this time, taking a look at where things stand on this grid right now. Gonzalez leads in GT3, Stoltz second, Bayer third, Scallops fourth, Hebden in fifth, Blaska in sixth, Sutton we're seeing here in a fight was seventh with Kevin Pereira, and the two look to go side by side on the run in towards Leeuwenhoek. This could get dicey. It's contact between the pair. Into the wall goes Steven Sutton. A huge clash between the Mustangs on the run in towards turn 10. Get a look at this on the replays here. It is disaster. Up towards turn 10, we see much earlier on the brakes than I'm thinking that Pereira was aware of at the time, and that was a huge hit against the wall for that number 7. Hopefully he's doing all right there, but that looked heavy between these two. Pereira is still on track at the moment. Minor damages for the 797. Much less can be said of the number 7. You can see there properly sidelines that wall. That is rough. That is very, very rough indeed. We see here the aftermath of it. Somehow, Steven Sutton, I mean, what have they made that Mustang out of? He's still going with what looks to only be minor aero damage. Benoit Luxalder's behind him there in 10th place, hunting him down. In the grand scheme, both of them yielded. Of course, Sutton didn't have much a choice down at turn 10, but you saw as well for Pereira, he did yield, and ultimately that gave rise for Vincent Simard to return to 7th place. So, looking at where that affects the grid right now, Benoit Luxalder in 10th, Luca Foll in 11th, Alexandre Albro in 12th, fighting with Morris W2 for 12th place at the moment. Morris in 13th, Valorio 14th, Black 15th, Chaperontier Roulants in 16th, and Julian Pereira, just having cleared the GT4 field, is now into 17th in proper. Then on to the discussion of the GT4s, and we see things are starting to get lively at the front lines here. Christian Lebay leads in GT4. Tom Breuer Division 2nd. Tom Wells Division 3rd. As you can see right behind him, hunting him down, is David Tanguay side by side with the current race leader, Alejandro Gonzalez, in the number 99. Navigates them like they're standing still. That is some proper precision there from the Spaniard. Bravo. So you see then Tanguay and Wells fighting for the podium positions. The Chevy's got the run. You can see Pascal Stoltz intercepts the pair of them. And this is the power difference between GT4 and GT3 there. As you can see, just swings low underneath them. Back onto the racing line. It's still side by side between the Ginetta and the Chevrolet on the exit of turn 2 in towards turn 3. Wells will be to the inside. He retakes 3rd place. But Tanguay will be to the inside on the second part of the Juxke sweep. Then into turn 5, but can't find the ground. Tom Wells holds on to Division 3rd. Tanguay in Division 4th, then Helge Lien in 5th, chasing from behind. Chris Eggert Runkianen, the Estonian, in Division 6th place. Malorex in 7th, Veyers in 8th, Sueva 9th, Josseliers in 10th, De Munster in 11th, Perry 12th, Sulzer 13th, and Turner 14th. It is absolutely epic stuff across the board here. Let's get a quick look back into the GT3s to see if there are any fights going on at the moment elsewhere. We'll be covering that fight on the second row of GT4 between Tom Wells and David Tanguay, because that has proven to be cinema so far here in South Africa. Looking briefly here up at the front row. Now, they've been navigating traffic for some time. You can see the front row of GT3 meets the front row of GT4. Side by side there between Tom Breuer and Pascal Stoltz. The two race-winning contenders, the race-win contenders, I should say, meet down at turn 12. You can see there, Pascal Stoltz. You can really see the size difference there between the Chevy and the Ford up in GT3. I mean, it is an absolute giant. That 7th gen Mustang. Of course, two legendary American marques there, Chevrolet and Ford. The 6th generation Camaro leading the charge for the GT4s, the 7th generation Mustang looking to challenge Ferrari up in the GT3s. So let's go and catch back on board with what is looking to be one of the more engaged fights of this current moment. The fight for Division 3rd between Tom Wells and David Tangway. As we see there, Mr. Scallops getting up on the inside through the Crow Thorns. That does force a bit of a wedge, and that allows the 30 to just sneak on through to get side by side. Now we find ourselves mirroring the last lap, but things wrap up a lot quicker for the 818 this time. We quickly just see here with Kevin Pereira once again, but let's go to catch on board with the likes of our current fight on the podium. Meanwhile, the number 22 there actually brings out the yellow flags. That's one of the GT3s in trouble. Again, down at turn 15. Repeat pattern there. A lot of drivers finding trouble down at turn 15. Meanwhile, the number 909, I believe that's Vigo Veyes in Porsche, is into the pit lane. 2 hours, 2 minutes, 30 seconds left to go. On board then with another driver, which I'm pretty sure we can... we can't actually, because he's got the different number, and he's got the 818. That's the number 12. That's the other placard. Meanwhile, we see Tangway leaps up the inside, super late on the brakes, and the Ginetta looks to swing low out through turn 10 and 11. Right behind them there, you can see is Mateusz Blaszka. This is in the fight for Division 3rd, and things are getting very likely to kick off into even more action between the GT4s. In towards the Crocodiles, still watching with that fight of Division 3rd on with Tom Wells. In the multi-class championship runs the number 12. Sadly, we can't use his graphic like we were able to use LeBay's earlier on. Was kind of hoping for that chance, but sadly not today. The number 15 in the pit lane at the moment, Archie Hebden, has been brought in on emergency grounds. Could that be a potential DNF coming up? As we see there, the Hunter 101064, whom I only can assume is Archie Hebden, saying wheel disconnect. So hardware failure is presumed there on the number 15 Ferrari of Hebden. Unless confirmed otherwise, that is the conclusion we've drawn from the evidence given to us in the Twitch chat there. Sadly, one of the brutal realities of sim racing, hardware failures becoming all too often a symptom in these races. You continue to watch here, this GT4 fight for third. It has been absolutely spectacular stuff here, mirroring the fight on the front here. Lightweight versus heavyweight, Ginetta versus Chevrolet. With the Alpine attacking on the front row for the lead of this, we do find ourselves with the roles reversed. The lightweight car defending. Looking around the field once again, and this is the scope of things up on the division front row for GT4. Half a second between LeBay and Breuer as they fall into lap traffic here. You can see alongside them Johnny Solzer, and just up the road from them Logan Perry. Behind them lapping traffic, and that is Mateusz Blaszka up the inside. That's the second lap running. That 159 has been forced all the way to the outside at turn 12. He's not going to be happy for much longer if he keeps getting forced off the racing line. Not much he can do with those GT3s. They will just take whatever chance they can get. As we see here, has created a bit of an opportunity out through turn 15. The chances are there. He's looking up the inside. It's contact amongst the front row. The Alpine and the Chevrolet collide at the front of the field for GT4. LeBay rejoins. Breuer's leading. What's going on then for these two now as LeBay retakes the lead off of a wounded Alpine number 159? Contact between the pair. There was a look up the inside, just squeezed into it. Both of them slammed the inside pit wall down at Ingwe Curve. It seems that coming out of it, the Chevrolet has got off rather lightly. The same cannot be said for the Alpine. Was caught between quite literally a rock and a hard place there, the concrete wall, and the hard place that is a full-weight Chevrolet. That has not gone particularly well then for Tom Breuer. Meanwhile, for Tom Wells, just looking back on with the Ginetta, things are not going much more swimmingly for the Ginetta as now they are being swamped in by Chevrolet's David Tangway. The number 30 with sizable chances to attack in the next couple of seconds here on the run out through turn 6. Couldn't have a look up the inside at turn 7. We see behind them at this time there, the fight going on for 8th place, Stephen Sutton in a wounded Ford. We saw that incident from earlier between himself and Kevin Pereira. And behind him, Benoit Alexander in the number 211. You see here, this is getting to be a very curious case. Two battles collide here. Division 3rd versus Division 8th. You see up the inside goes Sutton. Following as well, Luca Foll, who gets the leg up over Benoit Alexander. Now to take the charge over towards Sutton. We'll get on board with the GT3s in this scenario. as things are looking to get very, very spicy indeed. On with Luca Foal. You can see Tom Wells just over his nose there. Gets up on the Ginetta. You can see Stephen Sutton just right over his nose there. That's the target he's hunting down. 8th place at this time. Behind him, you can see is Benoit Alexander now swamped in on that second row of the GT4s. Wells in front of him. And Tanguay behind. Into the pits at this time. The 159 early pit stop then for Tom Breuer. Damage repairs for the 159. He's going to be in there for some time. The number 2 brings out the yellow flags at turn 7. So you see here the number 97, Luca Foal, hunting down Stephen Sutton. The chances are definitely there for a fight of 8th place in GT3. We see there is the chance as well starting to brew for a fight of the last of the top 5. This is from Matthias Blaska's point of view at this time. We can see behind him there. That's the car to focus on in this fight, as gaining ground in the last couple of laps. It started to bleed away just through this sector at this time has been Vincent Simard. Meanwhile, if we go to take a look around and see what the forefront of the GT3s is concerned with, Gonzalez now 2.5 seconds clear of Pascal Stoltz in second place. You see there Julian Pereira caught between the pair of them, lap traffic in the number 803. Pit lane starting to get livelier. Stephen Black in as well as Tom Breuer. Benoit Alexander 2.8 seconds from Luca Foal at this time. As Foal, I think, drops there to 9th. So taking a look around the field, we can see another fight going on here. This is for Division 4th. Dion Helgelian versus Chris Egert Runkianen. Chevrolet versus Porsche. So another matchup here where Chevrolet goes toe-to-toe with a much smaller car. This time the Porsche 718 Cayman Club Sport, the baby brother of the legendary 911. Tremendous noise there from the 6.2 litre under the bonnet of Helgelian's Chevy Camaro. You can see that very, very light use of the brakes in through to turn 15. Then gets down on the anchors in towards turn 16. The number 707 has been dished out a stop-go 30-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. That's for Stephen Black in the number 707 BMW up in GT3. We watch here with the fight of Division 4 between Helgelian and Runkianen. On their way in towards turn 2. Could Helgelian be sizing a move up the inside? Not this time around. Runkianen stays up in 4th on the run round Crowthorns. So taking a look as we cross into the last 2 hours of racing set to follow. The current scope of things is as follows, with drivers still in the pit lane, most recently in with Stephen Sutton. We are seeing here, forcing a bit of a wedge into the mix of it all there, is, I believe, that's the 22. Yes, it is. So that's Morris W2, the Swiss driver in GT3, just slicing his way through that fight of Division 4th as it stands. Or Division 5th, sorry. So yeah, that was our mistake, not Division 4th. Division, actually, no, it is Division 4th. My mistake there. They just realised they've got the 707 on the charts. That's a GT3. Yes, so this is for Division 4th. At this time, then, under strategy, likely to fall back into a fight of Division 5th later down the line. We see, though, things are about to get active side by side and then back into single file. So for but a moment's time, there was the suggestion of side by side down through turn 12. Looking up the inside, perhaps, there at turn 13. You can see that he's not afraid to take some risks here. And Helgelian is really trying his dearest to get up and around Chris Egert Runkianen in the number 380. Of course, with the 159 having come into the pits much earlier, we see that Tom Breuer currently down in what looks to be here Division 9th and 24th overall. You see, this is really quite a worrying sight here for Chris Egert Runkianen. He's not got straight line speed over the Chevrolet, and that gap is getting smaller and smaller with every passing lap. It is going to be a case of when, not if, the Chevy gets side by side with him, and what can he do then down towards turn 2? Could strategy stand in the way of this all? We could find out in the next couple of minutes here. Of course, 2 mandatory pit stops. The drivers will be potentially looking at their chances to take their pit stops around about now, and then their second one coming up in about 53 minutes when we get down to the last hour of racing here in Kyalami. So far, so good, though. I'd say this has definitely been a very solid race. A lot of major talking points to be had there. We're seeing currently an ongoing fight for what is now Division 2nd. And much like we saw there for the fight of Division 4th, that can be brought down a peg later down the line if strategy is able to be on the side of the 159. For the time being, they are for the fights of Division 2nd and Division 4th. We're quickly back on board here. Chris Eggert-Runkianen, the Estonian talent in the 380. Dion Helgulian, of course, we've seen him take the checkered flag first among the fray in the multi-class championship up in GT3 in his time with Ford. See him drop down back towards Chevrolet for this run here of the 2.4 hours of Kyalami for St. Jude Children's Hospital here in the HCCL race for children. Into the pit lane, Alexandre Abro, the 666. On his way into the pit lane at this time. You can see major damages there for the Ferrari as he brings himself into the pit box. 1 hour, 52 minutes just crossed over there before the end of this race. Some of the major talking points then, funnily enough, don't happen inside of GT3 at this time. They're going on down in the subclass up into GT4. Or down into GT4, I should say. Tom Wells versus David Tanguay for Division 2nd, Division 4th, then Chris Eggert-Runkianen versus Dion Helgulian. Two of the closest battles going on track at this time. In terms of some of the previous fights we were seeing up in GT3, they've now separated out by some distance there. 3 seconds at the last interval between Gonzalez and Stoltz at the front lines of GT3, and then it's 10.8 seconds between Bayer and Scallops. That is remarkable distance forged out there by the number 28 Lamborghini. Also in the pit lane at this time, Julian Pereira in the 803 BMW. Stephen Black in the pit lane to serve his stop-go 30-second penalty in the number 707 BMW. Meanwhile, we're going to catch back on board the onboard footage here from Dion Helgulian chasing Chris Eggert-Runkianen. We can also snap across to see the fight for second as well for the point of view of another Chevrolet here, David Tanguay in the number 30 Malwa Racing Chevrolet, chasing down Tom Wells up over his nose there in that 818 Golf liveried, or at least Golf inspired liveried Ginetta G55 out through to turn 15. Meanwhile, we see there, in the meantime, out through Lurkop, an exchange of position between Helgulian and Runkianen. Runkianen's on the inside of Helgulian. Helgulian will be to the inside of Runkianen on the run in towards turn 13. Splitting them down the middle is the 99 of Alejandro Gonzalez. Makes one move, then makes the second. Descended upon them, was very, very gracious with that one there. Almost like he wasn't even there for these two. Slipped between almost perfectly. The bottom line, though, up to fourth. Dion Helgulian with a bit of a rocky run out through turn 16. It allows the Porsche of Chris Eggert-Runkianen back up to his rear and into the slipstream, practically glued to the back end of the 45. The 380 tries to emerge from his shadow here. What could be the chances for the 718? We know stopping power is a great factor for Porsche. What can they do, though, down towards turn 2? Runkianen on the inside of Helgulian, and my God, he takes it back into fourth. Brilliant stuff. Has this, in fact, advanced up towards Division 3rd here? We are just going to quickly take a look as in the current standing. No, it is very much so still a case here of that top 3. So I don't know why it was saying Division 4th still for Helgulian. Now it says 5th. Yes, okay, so that adds up. What a move, though, by Runkianen. David versus Goliath here, up in that fight for 4th. And seeing that same story play out, we see that a big wedge has been forced between the two here on the fight on the podium between Wells and Tanguay. We saw Logan Perry, one of the lapped GT4s and one of the lapping GT3s of Morris W, making their way up through the field. Back on board here, Helgulian retakes it from Runkianen. What can they do down towards Lurkop? Running out wide, the 45, so the 380's got a chance here. The 45 will carry quite tremendous amounts of momentum on the exit of Lurkop. Behind them is Rafael Bayer, about to intercept with Lamborghini in towards turn 12. Gives them the lights, but they can't move out of the way now. Not with so much riding on the line. Running onto the gravel, somehow holding onto the car was Rafael Bayer. The 45 blindsided by a trail of smoke kicked into his eyes there. by Rafael Bayer. At the end of it all, though, coming in towards lap 19, Dion Helgulian now definitely holds on to position over Chris Eggert-Rungian, and these two have shared in an absolutely epic fight for Division 4th. Meanwhile, looking up to third, and that fight for Division 2nd. You see here our two contenders, David Tanguay and Tom Wells, still very, very close by to one another. These two have been inseparable for the longest time here. As we cross in past the first 30 or so minutes of racing. So just snapping between these two, because we're still very curious to see what is the state of affairs going on with two of the closest fights in GT4. We see things are starting to dissipate there between Rungian and Helgulian. These two have had a brilliant fight. It's a pity we couldn't capture that second retake of position down at, I think that was no, it wasn't Le Cop. It was here at Clubhouse where that position was retaken, because as we hit the S's and in towards Le Cop, it was the 45 back out in front of the 380. Tanguay v Wells, this is picking back up, though, in the fight for second. Now, they've been routinely interrupted by lapping cars, and they're about to be again. You can see they're looming in the distance out through the crocodiles at turn 13 and 14 is Alejandro Gonzalez. The leading GT3 has seen these two quite a few times in this race already. Out through turn 16. This is Tanguay's chance. Caught in the slipstream then. Over the course of that last lap was 6/10 faster than the Ginetta. Now he's got the chance to potentially look at the inside, but you can see cut off from being able to do so was that of the 99. He's got to size up his chances and size them up quick, because his second opportunity to overtake looks to have coincided with the arrival of Pascal Stoltz, only 2.3 seconds, and closing in the Ford. Quickly taking a look back to the previous fight of fourth to just see what the current status is, and we can see now definitely has folded out in the favour of Dion Helgulian, up the road from Chris Eggert-Rungian by 1.7 seconds. So you see here, there you have it, almost on schedule, forcing even greater of a wedge is that of Pascal Stoltz. You can see here, Tanguay's having to get brave on the brakes now to stay with that Ginetta and to bring the gap back into a more tolerable distance. He needs to be ideally within about 3 to 2/10 of a second as we hit turn 16, so that he can use the most amount of slipstream he can get here to get up and around the G55 before we hit turn 2. That's really the golden point here the 30 is aiming for. The number 707, another stop go 30 for Stephen Black. Out through turn 16. He's just a little out from the Goldilocks zone here. He's 0.4 of a second. So he's going to have to start reeling the Ginetta in. Bear in mind, in the first half of this straight, the Ginetta can actually keep wind with the Chevrolet. It's right about here where it starts to falter. Again, short ratio gearbox used for cup racing gives it tremendous acceleration, a lot of punch out of the corners, and that has been used to great effect so far by Tom Wells. But when it comes to actual top end past fifth gear, this is where the Ginetta starts to struggle. If I'm not mistaken as well, both of these are naturally aspirated units, two of the finest sounding NA units on this grid, 6.2 litre and 3.7 litre. Very nearly contact again. I mean, it's always been a bit of a gung-ho attitude for Rafael Bayer. If a gap exists, you go for it. I mean, he's really living up to the old adage by Ayrton Senna, if you no longer go for the gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver. We see with these two then, 0.3 of a second on the run in towards Le Cop. In towards Mineshaft. Now the chance exists there to look up the inside because he's covering centre mass of the road. Good area denial by the Ginetta, but that could play against him as onto the racing line for a moment there was David Tangwe, and that's what's keeping him super close to the rear end of that G55. And it's here through turn 15 where Wells is just able to get a little bit braver. He's able to carry a little bit more momentum. The Chevy showing signs of a little bit of its loftier nature. Now that was confounded by the arrival there of Julian Pereira, forcing his way up the inside over David Tangwe. So the Canadian talent in a 30 won't be pleased with how things are going so far because he's been so close yet so far away, and every time he's had an opportunity to strike at that 818, a GT3 has stepped into his path. Now he could be seeing opportunities, as it seems to have happened both ways and brought both of them back together. So looking at the rest of the field right now, where things stand at the moment, Gonzalez, Stoltz and Bayer still on the podium. Scallops in the top 4. Simard makes the top 5 now ahead of Mateusz Blaszka. Luca Foll in 7th place. Benoit Alexander in 8th. Anthony Valorio into the top 10 with Aston Martin there. Behind him, Stephen Sutton already having taken one of his 2 mandatory pit stops. You can see behind them there, Morris W2, Kevin Pereira and Alexandra Abro at the back of the GT3 field. Then into the GT4s, it is still been the case that Labey is leading, now separate from the Alpine, of which he got into arms with down at turn 15 and 16 not too long ago. That 159 of Tom Breuer is now down in what is 22nd overall. Early pit stop for damage repair for the Alpine was stuck in there for quite some time, and I think if we quickly take a look over, you can see that yes, that is the case, that he has repaired the majority of his damages. Next in his iron sights at this time is that of Matthias de Munster. I've just got wind there of some information from the race control of a disqualification for Stephen Black. His 3rd warning on speeding in the pit lane, and he's been disqualified from this race. 707 is out. And as we saw, into the pit lane went the number 119 of Christian Labey. That allows Tom Wells and David Tangwe to take up the front row for the time being. You see, this is one of the closest opportunities Tangwe's had for some time here on his way in towards turn 2. Can't find any ground of it. That is genuinely quite a bizarre one. Very rarely have we seen a black flag given to any driver for disqualification grounds. But today that seems to very much so be the case for the 707. Was getting a little too cheeky with the pit lane speed limit. And you'll see if we catch on with any drivers running in towards the pit lane exactly how easy it is to do that. So a lot like, as a matter of fact, another pit lane entry, which is Laguna Secas, which is just a very abrupt run in. You've got to get onto the anchors quick if you don't want to pick up a penalty. See there, Mr. Scallops, just having swept his way through this fight of what is now currently the division lead of GT4 for the time being. Under strategy, that will since change with the re-arrival of the 119. You see, though, for David Tangwe, he's building up some serious confidence with this machine now. He's sizing up his chances over that 818 on the exit of turn 11. Still in the slipstream, 0.3 of a second on the run down towards Mineshaft. You can see using absolutely every inch of the track now to his disposal. Down through turn 12. Has got the run here. But under the brakes, the Ginetta can just bite down a lot harder and a lot later. And that's what's keeping Chevrolet at arm's length here. Through turn 15 we go. And still no dice then on an overtake. We see forcing their way up the inside Vincent Simard. This could actually play quite nicely into Tangwe's hands here. A bit of free slipstream from the Lexus. Not that it can hold on for too much longer, of course. Lexus, one of the fastest cars in GT3. Top end we recorded over at Monza in and around the ballpark of 170, I think it was 174, 173 miles an hour. Now, they won't be seeing speeds near to that over the course of this race on a much shorter opening straight compared to what we have in Monza, but they will still be seeing some tremendous top end, especially when put up against the GT4s. You see there, very nearly a moment of trouble between Mateusz Blaszka and David Tanguay on the way in through turn 6, now to turn 7 at Clubhouse. So curious case we're seeing at the moment then. Of course, for the 119, was into the pit lanes not too long ago. Labe re-emerges behind Chris Egert-Runkianen. And then currently Division 5th by looks of things there. So behind Runkianen, Helgelian now up onto the podium for the time being. We still see ongoing that fight for the division lead. Now that will bleed out into the fight for second and third later down the line after these two take their first of two mandatory pit stops. Strategy is still going to play a heavy hand in today's race. The majority of drivers, I would say, are now going to be aiming to get into the pit lane probably when about 3/4 of an hour left of this race. So this is going to be quite a powerful stint for some. I think some drivers right now are waiting for about an hour and a half for their first pit stop. For the second pit stop is what I was trying to mention there, the 45-minute mark. We see into the pit lane goes David Tanguay in the number 30. So trying to predict the strategy here off of the number 30 and the number 119. They've come in around 1 hour 30, 1 hour 40. Realistically, they'll time it onto the hour. So expect around 37 minutes left in this race for Tanguay. About 40 minutes left for that of the 119 of Christian Labe. That would be roughly the gauge for it right now. Perfect on the hour stint. Great opening stint, though, all things considered for those two. At the moment, that leaves Tom Wells by his lonesome out in the lead of this race for the GT4s. Under strategy, that will change further down the line. Looking up to the GT3s, it is a very calm state of affairs here. Rafael Bayer came into the pits not too long ago to separate himself from the rest of the pack. He currently rejoins in 7th behind Luca Foll. And at the moment, Alejandro Gonzalez continues to lead. Yet to see a suggestion of the current race leader into the pit lanes anytime soon. We'll see if that's the case for the one trailing in his midst at the moment. Pascal Stoltz, no, also doesn't consider his chances of a pit lane run. Mr. Scallops moves up to 3rd. Because of the early pit stop there for Rafael Bayer, and that shifts Vincent Simard up towards 4th place. Mateusz Blaszka into the top 5, and Luca Foll has had a great turnaround drive, all things considered, because he was down in 12th at one point in this race. He's carved his way back up through the field. Now, we can consider as well a few of those positions could have been netted up to strategy differences, and especially in the case there of more recent cars in his vicinity there, like Rafael Bayer in 7th place. But it's still looking to be a solid turnaround drive here for Luca Foll. Things have definitely been a series of ups and downs in the last, looking at it now, has been nearly an hour of racing. You see into the pit lane goes Mateusz Blaszka. Sadly, we just currently unable to capture any cars running into the pit lane to show off how difficult that is to get the car lined up for the run in. We see that neither of the two cars on screen at the moment. That was Johnny Sodza in the Alpine and then Luca Foll on the McLaren on your screens at the moment. We're thinking of a pit lane run. We see for Rafael Bayer, he's already done his pit lane run. We see here for Anthony Valorio side by side with Dion Helgelian. Will there be the suggestion for the Aston Martin in? I must say as well, great opening stint as well for Valorio, but no considerations yet for his chances. Helgelian there, you can see just how short the run in. You can see those staggered lines represent the actual boundary line for the pit lane entry. It's super short. So effectively, you have to come out of turn 15 and slam onto the brakes on the racing line in the hopes that you get slowed down quick enough to not get a penalty. So into the pit lane goes Dion Helgelian. And that leaves Chris Egert-Runkianen now up to 2nd place in this race. The Estonian now on the front row alongside Tom Wells. Both of these two still yet to have taken their first mandatory pit stop of 2. And so we take a look around the field to see that the leading pair for GT3 is in. So that's Gonzalez and Stoltz. We'll see if Scallops is liable to follow them in here with an hour and 34 minutes left to go. And that seems to be the story. You can see there for the GT3, it really has to get down on the anchors, down to 50 kilometers an hour. That's roughly about, I'm trying to do the maths here in my head, but for the life of me, I'm not going to embarrass myself with doing so. Let's just go look it up. 50 kilometers an hour to miles per hour. I mean, we're talking about 30. So I had, yeah, okay, that's roughly what I thought it was. It was about 30 miles an hour. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of the European audience. Mr. Scallops in, Vincent Simard followed him in as well. We see Stoltz on his way out, and so too is the case for Gonzalez. Those two re-emerge at the forefront, by looks of things, of the GT3 field. It really did go to show just how far up the order they were. Luca Foll moves up to third place. We see Rafael Bayer about to capitalise on some extra positions here. He took an earlier run to the pits and overtakes Mr. Scallops and Vincent Simard all the meanwhile. Into the pit lane as well goes Benoit Laxalder in the number 211. Anthony Valorio joins them in the pit lane as well in the number 41 Aston Martin. That leaves Matthias Blaschke and Steven Sutton to stay out on track, not likely to come in on this lap, of course, having already taken their pit stops much earlier on. Mr. Scallops re-emerges then onto the field. In 5th place at the moment, Vincent Simard stays in 6th place then up the road from Benoit Laxalder. Anthony Valorio, possible to lose position out here to Matthias Blaschke. That looks to be the case here for the 41. It's going to drop down a peg. You see for Steven Sutton, side by side with Dion Helgelian. Still no suggestion yet of if Wells or Runkianen are looking at a pit lane entry anytime soon. Now, if I had to guess roughly what Wells is doing, I think he's maybe trying to time this up to be 1 hour and 30 left, and then he comes into the pits in about an hour's time when there's 30 minutes left in the race, and then sees things through to the end, because he'll have, on that second pair of tyres, much less time to wear them out. He'll have arguably more poignant stints towards the end of the race. So if he's able to hold decent positions between now and 30 minutes left in this race, he's got a very sizable chance to just go full hell for leather in that last 30 minutes. And absolutely tear those tyres up, knowing that all he's got to do is 30 minutes of racing. He's not going to do the full hour. He's not going to make those Pirellis last. And we can see into the pit lane. So, yeah, if it had been a lap longer there, it would have been dead on 1 hour and 30 minutes left to go, roughly, in the ballpark there for about a minute and 50 odd per lap there for the GT4s. Into the pit lane then goes Tom Wells. We'll see what the suggestion is in the near future here, as we also see in the pit lane at this time as Matthias Blaschke still in the number 33. Into the pits as well, Luca Foll in the number 97, liable to lose position out there, as we see taking up 4th place now is Mr. Scallops in the 394. We're on board with Chris Egert Runkianen in the number 380. We saw into the pit lane a moment ago was Tom Wells, but Runkianen stays out with Porsche. Perhaps he's going for one extra lap on top here. We have seen that to be a growing trend, with a few more cars coming in at the 1 hour and 30 mark of this race. You see Luca Foll emerging from the pit lane behind Vincent Simard. The question is, he's unlikely to be intercepted anytime soon here by Anthony Valorio. Currently finds himself with a handful of GT4s in his midst there, amongst them the ongoing fight at this time. Looking at the charts here, what is currently Division 4th place. That's Tom Broer versus Matthias de Munster. So still on board at this time with Breuer v de Munster. We also can see another close-by fight, but this is admittedly between two different divisions, and that's just already wrapped itself up. That was Kevin Pereira, already on his 2nd mandatory pit stop. So if he's got confidence in the car's fuel system, and he thinks he can min-max the fuel consumption all the way to the line, if he can do 1 hour and 30 minutes, there's nothing to say that he can't. And that could be the last time we ever see him in the pit lane. It's a lofty move there. I'm not super convinced that he can do 1 hour and 30 on a full tank. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to the fuel consumption rates of GT3 cars. It's not something that's often crossed my radar, but you'd make the assertion that of all engines to be, let's say, not particularly fuel economical, a 5.4 litre naturally aspirated V8 engine would probably be high up on that list. I mean, if we're taking, shots here at who would be probably the best for fuel economy, I mean, you'd be taking a look at the 1.8 litre in that Alpine. That's practically, by comparison to what Chevrolet and Ford are kicking out with 6.2 and 5.4 litres. I mean, this is just going to be sipping at its fuel tank like a Capri Sun, as it were. See, they're up on 2 wheels. still in very close proximity there. So this is actually for Division 5th, not Division 4th. So there was a mistake on our end in that fight. We'll go and catch on board, though, with the Alpine, as things are looking to get very lively here. On board with Tom Breuer, fighting with Matthias de Munster for Division 5th in GT4. It's been a great turnaround since his incident with Christian Lebay at the forefront of the GT4 fight earlier on today. You see there, once again denied of a move side by side with de Munster by the imminent approach there of Gonzalez. And looking from this point of view, that's got to be terrifying for the drivers. Obviously, they get a little bit more peripheral view than we do. They also get the adage of a vehicle radar so that they can detect cars coming in from behind and how close they are to one another. But from our point of view, just watching the cameras placed on the dashboard, that was terrifying to see just how quickly the 99 emerged into frame and then disappeared from it. You can see already has put 1.7 seconds over the nose here of that Alpine. .4 of a second right now, Alpine versus Mercedes. And the topic of engines as well, I mean, he's up against a very, very solid unit there from Mercedes-AMG, the M178. That's shipped with the Mercedes-AMG GT, 4-litre twin-turbo. Licensed for export as the M177 for Aston Martin's use, and the V8 Vantage later became the basis of their GT3 engine, you'll find in the number 41. Less on the engine conversation right now, as we do have the conversation of something a little bit more pressing to these drivers, and that's a yellow flag out in front. The number 80, if my memory serves me correct there. Yes, the number 80 is what brought it out, and you can see there stranded is, by looks of it there, Johnny Sulzer in his fellow Alpine. And by looks of it there, Sulzer's got back up and running, so there's no fuel issue. As that was definitely something that could be considered at this time. Considering we're coming up on the sort of full hour of racing, if drivers do underfuel, and we have seen it to be a case in the past before where drivers have underfueled. In, I'd say even GT3 this has happened as well as GT4. Not entirely out of the realm of possibility that a driver's car could conk out on lack of fuel. See, there's Rafael Bayer. Now emerging up over the nose of the Alpine. Quickly carves his way through these two in their fight of Division 5th. Currently in the fight of 17th overall. So looking at where the nearest fights are on track at this time, this is one among them. That fight for 5th in GT4. And it looks to be, at least according to telemetry given to us here on the left-hand side, the closest currently ongoing. There are nearby fights potentially to kick off soon. Perry v Dresseliers in down in 21st overall. And that's for Division 10th. So the last of the GT4 top 10s there by the looks of it. There is still the pressing factor in GT4 of Chris Egert Runkianen. The Estonian still yet to have come into the pit lane. They spent quite some time out on track now, coming up towards that first full hour of racing, about a minute from now. We started things off with 2 hours, 24 minutes of racing. That's 144 minutes in total, or roughly 2.4 hours, hence the namesake of the event. Now we're coming up on the first hour of racing proper. Runkianen still with no current suggestion of a pit lane entry until that point. He's held out strong there, done the full hour in the 380. We'll see where it lands him, though, after his first of two. So we're back on with these two as they're the closest fight on track at the moment. De Munster versus Breuer. Of course, another unique aspect of the Alpine is it's one of only two cars in circulation for GT4 on today's grid, at least, to be rear-engined, the other being the Porsche 718 Cayman. Still on board then with De Munster versus Breuer. We'll leave you on board with the fight of Division 4 for the time being. We see off in the distance by 12 seconds is Tom Wells up in third. Division 5th, I should say. Sorry, he's up in 4th. I don't know why we keep getting those wires crossed. Very confusing. This is in the fight for Division 5th. See things getting a lot closer now for the Alpine, looking to go around the outside at turn 7. Tom Breuer around the outside on Matthias de Munster, Mercedes versus Alpine. On the exit of turn 7, on the run in towards turn 8, he could have the chances to swing high over the nose of the Mercedes, but going super late on the brakes is de Munster. You can see just how large the Merc is up against the Alpine. And somehow getting up in front through the S's is the Alpine of Tom Breuer. The Mercedes looking to strike back through Lurkop at turns 10 and 11. Late on the brakes once again for Matthias de Munster. The 159 tries to cut from underneath him. Out through turn 10 into turn 11. Very close to it, but tucks back in behind for 5th. For 6th, I should say. Still ongoing in the fight for 5th. A lack of momentum allows the Alpine to swing around the outside there. And an almost Alonso v Schumacher-esque move down through turn 12. Into turn 13, up to 5th for Tom Breuer. What is the fighting chances then for Matthias de Munster? Tucks in behind the Alpine. Now, as we head down the opening straight, there is a great chance for him to strike back at the number 159. Heading down through turn 16 we go. A great move then by Tom Breuer. Great exchange of positions over the course of that last lap just gone on lap 32 between these two drivers. Off by half a second then as we enter the opening straight. Matthias de Munster is able to possibly reel things back in over the Alpine. This is not such a clear-cut case as what we've seen with Ginetta before, where there's a very clear discrepancy in straight line speed. That Alpine can definitely do some decent top end. Now, it's not going to be breaking any records here, but it has got the leg up over an Alpine. Not an Alpine, sorry, a Ginetta. When push comes to shove, I mean, it would have a leg up over itself, I imagine. Out through turn 5. So you see now intercepting the Mr. Scallops in the Ferrari 488, number 394, I should say. Yeah, I definitely need to get my eyes checked. You know, I've been getting mail for the last couple of months saying that my eye test is ready and I just haven't gone. Really should do. Really, really should do. And it shows. Still in this fight for 5th then. Now Munster pushed on to the defending angle. De Munster has a great chance here to fight back over the Alpine, but he's got to pick and choose his fights. We see here on the exit of the S's could be the first opportunity of many in the next hour and 20 minutes. We'll catch on with these two a little later on just to take a look around the track. We see here one of the other Alpines in circulation here. Johnny Sulzer's number 80 car had issues earlier on. We see chasing down the Ginetta up in front of him there. The number 128, Sebastian Turner, had very early doors issues. We thought he could have possibly been a DNF with how early he was retired to the pit lane, but he's come back out and is still in the fight here. That's currently for Division 12th in GT4 and 24th overall. Looking around for where nearby fights could be coming from. There's definitely something to be proven here between Pascal Stoltz and Rafael Bayer. That gap has started to wane away from the Ford and over towards the Lamborghini. 3 seconds in and around it there. Bounces up a few tenths of a second either side every now and again. There is the chances here on the pace that he's been on throughout today for Rafael Bayer, especially heading into that second stint, to potentially have a go at challenging second place. You can see just up in front there is Pascal Stoltz in that bright green number 172. Just in front of him was Stephen Sutton. So you see from the second half of this fight on board with Matthias de Munster in the number 3. Looking up in front, we see Gonzalez side by side with Valorio, attempting to lap past the Aston Martin. We see from the point of view of Alexandra Abro, as the 99 tucks back in behind the 41. The 41 looks to potentially give the space there around the outside, tucks back in behind the 99. So there we see Valorio giving space over to Gonzalez. So you see there, Alejandro Gonzalez still leading this charge and on towards his chances to win here in Kyalami in the GT3 division. An hour and 18 minutes just ticked over there before the checkered flag. We could be seeing in the near future as well, just observing this gap at the moment, with Runkianen still yet to pit. And by looks of it there, has actually lost out the lead of the GT4 division to Christian Lebay, who now retakes the charge up at the front lines there, with Runkianen now down by 7 seconds. The number 380 has stayed out for considerably longer than we'd have expected him to do so. And now does find himself staring down a bit of an unfortunate dilemma, because the car he spent the longest time fighting with, that being David Tanguay, is looking to potentially have a go here. Actually, no, it wasn't Tanguay. It was Helge Leon. My mistake. But he is looking to fight with Tanguay soon then. Tell you what, we'll leave you on board with a ongoing fight here. Jess Elias versus Malarex. This is for Division 8th place. We'll be back in just a moment's time. So we return, still watching on with the fight for Division 8 down in GT4 between Jusseliers and Malarex. We'll catch away from them for the time being to see what the rest of the grid is concerned with as we drop into the last hour and 15 minutes of racing. So looking at the forefront of things, giving us the full grid rundown before our next wave of major pit stops, with one mandatory pit stop still applicable for the majority of the grids today. Alejandro Gonzalez leads the charge with the fastest lap, having retaken the fastest lap away from Pascal Stolt, who maintained second place for the time being. The gap now having massively drawn away between himself and Rafael Bayer. There was the previous suggestion in the last couple of laps that Bayer could have caught up with Lamborghini. That gap advanced from what was 3 seconds to, as we see here, crossing into the next interval for the number 28, 6.3 seconds. Mr. Scallops in 4th place, with Ferrari ahead of Vincent Simard in 5th, Luca Foll in 6th place, and on the charge for a top 5 return. There is that imminent fight coming up in the next couple of laps here. He's separate from the Lexus up over his nose by about 2 seconds as they cross the line. Anthony Valorio in 7th place ahead of Benoit Alexalde in 8th, with Stephen Sutton in 9th place and Morris W2. Big trouble there for the Swiss driver on the exit of turn 16. Has already got damage over his nose and he's currently in 10th. Alexandra Abro in 11th place, I should say, and in 12th is Kevin Pereira. Then looking into the GT4s, as we've just seen an exchange of position there for second place. We'll catch on with that in a moment's time, but leading the charge for the GT4s is Christian Lebay in the 119 Chevrolet. David Tanguay in second place, now in the number 30, having just passed up Chris Egertrunkianen for third. Now down to third, I should say. He was passed up for second. The Estonian now third place in this race, and still the only driver on this grid yet to have taken either of their mandatory pit stops. Behind them and set to move up onto a division podium is Tom Wells with Alpine up the road at the moment from Tom Breuer, who has made a serious comeback drive, now currently in the division top 5, set to possibly move up to 4th in the next couple of laps here. After his brief fight with Matthias de Munster, now currently in Division 6th. 7th for Helgelian, 8th for Malarex, 9th for Dresseliers, and 10th for Logan Perry. 11th for Oliver Swaver, and 12th for Sebastian Turner. 13th at the moment, actually, would be for Johnny Sulzer, as the back of the field there, and what is currently 13th for the GT3s is Julian Pereira. Waylaid from the rest of the GT3s by some distance there. He does find himself in a very odd position on today's grid after having very early doors damages that brought him into the pit lane for quite a few laps here. Finding himself considerably farther down the order compared to any other GT3s.
We are halfway through. Keep it up.
So now as we hit the session halfway, that's what the grid currently looks like at the moment. Now, fights to consider in the near future here. Was still definitely on the table for a time. Luca Foll versus Vincent Simar, but lap traffic has waylaid their chances for the time being. They may have to wait until the second stint of today, or sorry, third stint, as the opening stint was technically the first stint. The second stint they're in the midst of at the moment, so they'll, yes, have to wait for the third stint of this race before they have their next available chances to go head-to-head. In terms of things for Chris Egertrunkianen, I mean, he has gone extra long on this one. Still not really sure what the strategy is for the 380 at this time. Any sort of logical conclusions of him pitting have since left the conversation. And now we simply do not know what strategy the 380 is looking to employ, because ultimately this going long strategy of his has just not worked out the way that he'd hoped to. He's lost out second place on track, and now under strategy is liable to lose the top 5 as well. So for Runkianen, he has found himself in a bit of an odd game here. Now, there is still the chance, I wouldn't say it's off the table for him to be in the top 5 by the end of the race, but under strategy right now, it'll be the case where after his second pit stop, he will have to be fighting his way up to 5th. So that he can still do it. There's everything to say that he can still do it, but the current set piece that he'll be playing into is that he's going to have to fight for it. He's not going to be able to drop into 5th place unless someone in front of him crashes. Those are the stakes right now for the 380. He has definitely played this a little too long. He's drawn it out for a little too long now to where it's going to have any value playing the late game strategy-wise. Whether or not he's just going to do 2 pit stop laps, I mean, honestly, we just don't know at this point. Of course, we can't read any of the strategies off of the drivers. Not that they're liable to give us a look at their strategies. That will give the leg up to their competitors. You know, competitor confidentiality and so on and so forth. So we are playing a bit of a guessing game here, and I think we were right on some of the assumptions that some of the drivers were going to look for the hour-and-a-half mark, and I think that could still manifest in the second pit stops down towards the last 30 or so minutes of racing here in Kyalami today. There is definitely the chances that we'll see another big wad of pit stops in the next sort of 39 minutes of racing with any hopes here. But ultimately, we can't predict absolutely every driver. So at the moment, as we sort of enter this middle section, we're between major areas of the race. We're not in the sort of opening 30 minutes to an hour. We're not in the last 30 minutes to an hour. So there is still a curious case here. A lot of drivers sort of split around the field. I think we are expecting to see a lot of that action join back up in the last, say, 3/4 of an hour when we get down towards 45 minutes left in the race. Now, it's a little bit more difficult to exactly time where is the most amount of action in the race going to happen when you have 2 hours and 24 minutes, of course, playing into the whole 2.4-hour theme as opposed to the 24-hour theme. As you know, that's been the sort of the joke for a lot of leagues, is to do this sort of micro version of a 24-hour race by calling it the 2.4 hour. It ends up being 2 hours 24 minutes, which makes it harder to predict because you haven't got the case where you've got a one mandatory pit stop race on 2 hours. So you'll see them pit almost dead on halfway 90% of the time. You get that 50-50 stint split. Stint 1, they play very aggressively at the start, thin out towards the middle, and then it just starts all over again, with the second half being even more aggressive as they build back up on new tyres and start pushing each other around the track towards the end of the race. A 3-hour race, larger than this one, like we saw yesterday, you can realistically expect that middle hour to be where a lot of this spread out happens and everything joins back up in the 3rd hour. It's much harder to call, though, when you're working with different numbers like this. Where do I personally think we could expect to see the majority of the grid close back in on each other and start going toe-to-toe for positions? On a mass scale, I'd say the last 45 minutes. It's the moment we start seeing that wave of new pit stops is when we start to see that. And right now, if we had to go for a middle ground where people could be running a bit earlier on this, the ones who have pitted earlier in this race would be pitting, I'd say, probably in the next 7 or so minutes. And then on the far end of it, you can see 25 to 30 minutes left of this race where you get the super late pit stop runners. I would say your middle ground is 45 minutes, and that's where we're going to see, I'd say, a bulk of the pit stops right now. I'd be happy to be correct on that, but of course, again, all of it is just total speculation. We don't have their strategies at this time, and I hate to sound like a broken record repeating that previous point there. We do have a nearby fight here, and it's Jusseliers v Malarex. Now, we caught them earlier on. This was in the fight of Division 8 at the time we were capturing them. We now see that Malarex drops in behind Jusseliers in the Aston Martin. Moreover, Johnny Sodza is into the pit lane much earlier than predicted there. 1 hour, 6 minutes left to go. And the number 80 Alpine is in. The number 380 finally comes in there. And that's Chris Egert Runkianen with Porsche finally into the pit lane for his first of 2 mandatory pit stops. Again, a very curious case. We don't really know what his strategy is like. It's not following anything that would even be remotely conventional in this approach here. He has left this super late on the first of 2. I'd say feasibly now, we'll probably see him go for the pits in like the last 20 or so minutes, by the way that he's timing things at this time. Runkianen, I think the best chances he has in trying to charge for a top 5, it would be the case where he's going to have to go super long again into the last 20 or so minutes of race time, and he's just going to have to completely cane it now for the next 45 minutes. The next 45 minutes of driving have got to be absolutely flat for the 380 to be within a chance now of the top 5 because of that very bizarre strategy he's found himself in at this time. He's dropped in behind Dion Helgelien. I mean, the chances still remain there. Actually, no, not likely at this time. I was going to say that the chances were maybe there that he would drop out behind Jusseliers, but seeing where Jusseliers is on track, very unlikely, as we see Runkianen is back out on track here. Currently finds himself Division 7th. So in the grand scheme, he's got to conquer all of 2 positions to put himself back into a top 5 fight. But bear in mind, it's 26.5 seconds between Helgelien, or near enough 26.5 seconds between Helgelien and Matthias de Munster. Matthias de Munster representing the back of that top 5 at this time, and that number 3 Mercedes. So that's the current goal for Chris Egert Runkianen, is to hunt them down. Meanwhile, we see here the car that's just got up and around him. You can start to see this is the build-up into that fight for the top 5. Vincent Simard just in the foreground there, and the number 120 Lexus RCF. And we're watching here with Luca Full. Let's go to catch back on board then with Full at this time. Charging up towards the back end of the Lexus. We saw just a bit of an upset in the background as we cut across a few cars. We saw that was Alexandra Abro behind Mr. Scallops. Had a bit of bother in through the Crocodiles. Let's stay on board though with Luca Foll. This is in the fight of the top 5 in GT3. Just under an hour and 4 minutes left to go here in Kyalami. We're definitely starting to see that build up to the top 5 now as it drops to within just under a second between Simard and Full. A curious matchup indeed, and we've not seen this kind of matchup here, McLaren v Lexus, in some time here on TRTN. I think the last time there was quite a notable account of it was throughout parts of Season 2 of, if I'm not mistaken, the NLRL Sunday League. I might be mistaken on that front, but it is a case where seeing Lexus go toe-to-toe with McLaren is quite a rare sight indeed in terms of car-to-car matchups here. See, though, that Luca Full is closing in fast. Meanwhile, the 803 brings out the yellow flags out of turn 15. Yet another victim of Cheetah Corner. We see there for Luca Full. Bit of a step out through Lurkop, and that just snips away so much of the time he has spent so long building up here over Vincent Simard. In the last lap as well, just ever so slightly faster was Luca Full. Had it not been for that step out through Lurkop, I imagine it could be even faster than a 142.790, his personal best 142.315 as we enter lap 47. Up and around turn 5 we go on the run up towards turn 6. Simard still holding on for dear life there in the 120, taking a look on a wider scale to see where some of the other fights of today's grid could be coming from. We'll be taking a look further down the line to see the fight going on for 8th place, Benoit Alexander versus Stephen Sutton. That's just for the GT3 field. Taking a look at the GT4s, one of the closest gaps we see there is Jusseliers to Malarex, and that's happening just behind the lapping GT4 of Tom Wells, currently 3rd place. Let's go back on board with these two fights up in GT3, though. Alexander v Sutton for 8th, and then further up the road, Simard v Full for 5th. I mean, I think things could be coming to a head here, with the McLaren getting very close. Is he going to make the same mistake as he did on lap 46, I should say? Not this time around, so that's great news for Luca Full. They head down towards turn 12, whilst these two here, Sutton v Luxalder, head up through the Juxgay sweep and in towards turn 5 of Barbecue. You see, looking up the inside, Luca Full then backs out of it. So he's trying to play a little bit of mind games, we can see here with the 120, trying to fake out a move to the inside so he compromises on his line, goes off the racing line to defend up the inside, and that's ultimately what could give Luca Full a slightly easier line. And we've seen this employed countless times here in GT racing. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. Down towards turn 2. And see slightly better rotation off the McLaren, with the Lexus just holding strong up through the Juxgay sweep. Now, just meanwhile, Sutton still pursuing Luxalder. See, the Ferrari has got a little bit of a gap now over the number 7 since we last saw them. The same definitely can't be said between these two. Fold getting closer and closer and closer now to Vincent Simard. One thing to consider as well as we're getting in towards that second window not far from now is that the tyres are going to start falling off quite rapidly for a few of these cars. Very nearly contact between the pair. That got very dicey between Luca Full and Vincent Simard. McLaren just avoided crisis by a couple thousandths of a second there in terms of a difference in reaction timing. So that's great stuff to see by the 97 to keep himself out of trouble. See down the opening straight to Benoit Alexander taking some slipstream off of, that's the 30 car there. So that is not Vincent Simard, sorry, that's David Tanguay. Stephen Sutton getting up the inside on Tanguay as well, not looking to stay in the wake of a GT4 in his time pursuing P8. Looking up through the field, just catching back on board down through turn 13. You see here the scope of things between Simard and Full in the fight at the last of the top 5 positions. Now, something to draw to your attention is going on down in GT4 at this time. See here, Thibaut Jusseliers chasing down the likes of Malarex. Vladimir Malarex 7, full name there, in the 777. up over the nose then of Thibaut Jasselier. You see intercepting the pair, Morris W2. So catching back on board with our GT3 fights for about a moment here. We see Stephen Sutton chasing down Benoit Laxalda. And then up the road from them, we can see that Vincent Simard and Luca Foll still going head-to-head here for 5th place. You see into the pit lane, earlier doors running of things than we expected from Stephen Sutton. Bear in mind, he obviously had to deal with damage repairs in his first pit lane run, so that has kind of kicked everything down a step for him. He's having to compensate now with an earlier second pit stop to give himself the longer run than most. He'll be looking for quite a few undercuts there in the next 57 minutes. In goes the number 7. We see in the pit lane alongside him at this time, Julian Pereira and Johnny Souza. For the looks of it, for Souza, that could be the Alpine out of this race. He's been in the pit lane for quite some time now. In talks of Luca Foll v Vincent Simard, we can see in the time last having seen these two head-to-head, it has now been a case where the Lexus has fallen out behind the McLaren. Luca Foll now up to the top 5. Vincent Simard having dropped down to 6th place. Meanwhile, Tom Breuer comes into the pit lane now. Same story as Stephen Sutton. He was caught up in an incident earlier on down at turn 16 between himself and Christian Labey. That caused considerable damage to Breuerman of the pit lane on his first of 2 much earlier than he'd like. And now, much like the number 7, he's compensating with an earlier pit stop to follow up, trying for more undercuts to keep himself in the top 5 by the end of today's race. It's going to be a bit of a recovery drive here for Breuer. His chances to fight for the race lead in GT4 and then the race win have been scattered. But he can still possibly, if he really plays his cards right here in the next 56 minutes, be within a shot, A, of a top 5, B, at the best of times here, of a potential podium. Now, that's a tough margin to clear when you consider it has been a ruthless performance. One of the most clean and consistent performances across the board here for Tom Wells. Normally, a driver that gets shoved around in the ranks of GT3 in the titular Ginetta. He's really been able to show, put it on the right kind of surface, give him the right kind of day, and he can soar above the competition in the G55. The only cars capable of staying up over his nose throughout today's race have been manufactured by Chevrolet, the most dominant manufacturer in the GT4 scope of things in the last couple of years here. I made this claim before, and I believe it was over on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series in Season 2 on Competizione Performance League. You can catch those on Wednesday mornings, otherwise Tuesday evenings at, I believe it's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 1 to 2 a.m. in the UK, 1 a.m. start. And what we were talking about in there is the kind of people that we've seen to complain about Ford dominance in GT3 have clearly never stepped a foot into a GT4. As that season has been completely dominated by the Camaro. There have been 3 occasions now of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 finish for Chevrolet in that season, and I'm pretty sure we're not even halfway through Season 2 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, of which we see drivers like Labey and Tanguay currently at the forefront of this field. So relating this back towards that topic for Tom Wells, the fact that he's been able to come along here against drivers we've seen to be serious competitive talents on this grid. You know, drivers like Breuer, drivers like De Munster for that matter, drivers that we've seen before like Helge Leon as well, who had a great time in GT4, has had an even better time since moving up into GT3 with the Ford Motor Company. It has been a case for that Ginetta to come along, and for Tom Wells, who has been very faithful to Ginetta for the longest time. It is really quite a special thing to see indeed. Now, of course, there could have still been, had things not gone the way they did, that chance that Wells could have fought today even more so with Breuer in the fellow lightweight car, the Alpine A110. But obviously, fate has operated in different ways throughout today's race. We see into the pit lane is Rafael Bayer. And that could allow Mr. Scallops the path to move up to 3rd for the time being. As we see heading into the pit lane as well, look to have been Morris W2. Into the pit lanes goes the number 22. So Scallops stays out. Bayer still in the pit lane at this time, still yet to be cleared of the jacks. The number 28 drops down toward 4th place. Luca Foll making his way through turn 15. And the time since overtaking Vincent Simard has put 3 seconds over the 120. So we see Rafael Bayer cleared for exit. You can see really not too long a run there. He's been definitely dealt a very lucky hand in terms of his pit box placement. And number 28 was able to just drop off the jacks and get going almost immediately there. Emerges up and ahead of Luca Folt and into 4th place. Only drops down a single position. So again, it really does go to show just how far ahead the top 3 has been throughout today's race in GT3. Also in the pit lane at this time, of course, we saw was Morris W2. We also see Alexandra Abro in the number 666. Now, I am quite pleasantly surprised to see a few of these earlier pit stops in and around the 53, 52 minute mark we've seen, and even earlier than that, 57 or so minutes for Tom Breuer earlier on in this race. We see in the pits as well, Oliver Swaver in the number 19 McLaren. A rarely sighted car on this grid. We've only seen a handful of times throughout today. Been hovering around sort of in the background of the GT4s for some time. I think was one of the earlier casualties caught up in the opening laps of today's race. There was that huge incident up through the Juxgay sweep for the first time on lap 1. I imagine this is quite a cathartic feeling then for Stephen Sutton in the time since his incident fighting with the 797. Oh my goodness, look at that. A huge hit between himself and Thibaut Dresselier. Somehow that Porsche emerges still facing the right way around, but get a look at that on the replay. Just nicked him on the exit of turn 12. There, just tapped around the rear, and then Porsche just ping-ponged off of that wall and bounced straight back out on track. But you can see into the pit lane goes Thibaut Dresselier in the bottom right hand side of your screen at the moment on the live footage for the number 227. That got ugly though. Into the pits goes the Porsche. A little bit of desync as we rejoin the field. That's nothing to worry about. That's our side, not the drivers. I'm sure that Sutton didn't intend to do that, but was squeezed a little bit there for space, trying to make his way through the GT4s. So what we were trying to say before that incident, it's got to be quite a cathartic feeling after the time he spent fighting with the 797. Ultimately, that damage is what put him down the order in the first place, to now find himself ahead of Kevin Pereira after his last pit stop. So he's got 50 minutes to the line here. He's currently up the road from the driver who took him out down at Lurkop. No word yet from the front row, though. Gonzalez and Stoltz, the steadfast leaders of this grid by a country mile today, have had no current look into the pits for their last pit stop, but we do see one earlier than expected for the leader of GT4, Christian Lebay, in on the last 50 minutes, so undercuts our predictions by about 5 minutes there. What is the word for Tangway? He stays out down towards turn 16, and then we're left to question what's going to be the going rates here for Tom Wells, the 818 nearest to the pit lane entry for GT4. Up in front of him there, you can see Stephen Sutton. Tom Wells doesn't have a look into the pit lane either. Matthias de Munster, currently down through the Crocodiles, would be next on that line of questioning. So we see the 119 still in the pit lane, about to be cleared off of the jacks and let back out onto the track here. We see from Matthias de Munster does not follow suit on the same kind of strategy. We see that Lebay obviously running for earlier pit stops so he can spend a lot longer out by his lonesome, separated from the rest of the field, giving himself the space. We've seen early pit stops used before by Lebay to great success. I mean, the double sprint race back in, I think it was season 3 or season 4 of the Sunday League, where he did a very early pit stop in Valencia. Actually worked out in his favour because it turned what was otherwise a less than desirable qualifying result into better race results in the long run. So Lebay leaves the pit lane at the moment, just up the road from Matthias de Munster. Just up the road with de Munster ahead, I should point out as well, as the data readjusts. So back on the same line of questioning from before, with the front runners of GT4 coming in, or at least the front runner of GT4, singular, having come into the pit lane. What is yet the suggestion for the leader of GT3? Alejandro Gonzalez currently caught between some GT4s there. You can see up over his nose the 818 of Tom Wells. Behind him is Oliver Swaver with McLaren on his run in towards Mineshaft at turn 12. Long sweeping left-hander. He holds on to the fastest lap. He's got considerable distance over Pascal Stoltz, one that he's been able to carve out tooth and nail over the course of what has been just under an hour and a half's worth of racing here in Kyalami. It might be just over an hour and a half, as a matter of fact. Again, weird numbers, not good with them. Into the pit lane at the moment, of course, still is the number 227. But after their second mandatory pit stop, they come in. That's Thibaut Jasseliers in the number 227. And we don't yet know what the suggestion might be for him at this time. He's dropped in behind Logan Perry and Oliver Swaver. Into the pit lane as well, we saw in front of him was Matthias de Munster in the number 3 Mercedes. He comes to a stop in his pit box there. Joins us in the pit lane from 4th in GT4. Dion Helgelian, we'll see if he comes into the pits as well. Yes, that is the case for the American in the number 45. In goes the Chevrolet. Very brisk stop there. Well, I think was quite lucky to get that within the speed limit by looks of things. You see, leaving the pit lane goes Jasselier. Curious case then as to why he's come in for a third time as we get closer and closer to the 3/4 of an hour mark. Now we're seeing more and more cars coming into the pit, so I am actually quite pleasantly surprised that amongst my innate rambling about what the strategy could look like, we are actually seeing some of that at least come to fruition. Now we've seen drivers undercut it by a few minutes. This is a lot closer to our prediction than what we saw from the example before, the 119 of Christian LeBay. And dare I say it, we actually are seeing quite a curious case here, because we see up in the front of the field at the moment is David Tanguay and Tom Wells. After their most recent pit stops, Matthias de Munster drops in behind Chris Eggert-Runkianen, but there more poignantly is Tom Breuer. Tom Breuer at this time waiting for the interval timing to come through to see just how far he is from LeBay. Now we are expecting a decently large gap at this time. As you can see, yes, those two are separated by about half a lap. But that still raises an interesting sign here for Tom Breuer, because he has already, by looks of it, secured his position inside of the top 5. We see David Tanguay came into the pits in the meantime, leaving Tom Wells to go on into the lead here before strategy in GT4. Anthony Valorio comes in, and so too does Alejandro Gonzalez. So dead on the 45-minute mark. That is genuinely quite a surprise to me how we got that so close to the mark. I sometimes impress myself with the absolutely innate rambling that I come out with. There is yet method to my madness. Kevin Pereira into the pit lane as well, the 797. There we see up in the foreground the 99 on his way out. So we see for the case at the moment here that Tom Wells is still on track for a podium today, as the gap still between himself and Tom Breuer would be too great, if I'm looking at this correctly here for GT4, to where the Alpine is unlikely to intercept. However, this still comes as a major takeaway point here for Tom Breuer, that he still stands upon the chances to be in the top 5 by the end of this race. And considering where things went for him over the course of the race earlier on, I would still say that has come out as a victory in its own respect. He's been able to come back from quite a sizable tank slapper there, where he was effectively crushed up against a wall between a concrete barrier and a full-speed Chevrolet Camaro. He's done quite well to put Alpine back in the top 5. Now, it may not be the most desirable of results he wanted. I know that definitely he had the pace to hunt down the race win today. He did start up towards the front lines. He was up on that front row for the race start in GT4. But that is often the case of GT4 racing, is qualifying only tells part of the story. GT3, sometimes you can definitely jump to conclusions a lot easier. You know, you see a Ford on pole position, or you see, you know, back in the day, if you were to see a McLaren on pole position or a BMW on pole position, you could definitely coin toss that into being a 50-50 chance that they go on to win that race. In GT4, it's just too open. Way too open to call, way too wide of a pool, as it were. In the pits since the time we started talking, we see coming in there Vladimir Ator-Malarex into the pit lane, and Matthias de Munster in the pit lane as well. Now, this comes as a curious one because like we saw earlier for Thibaut Dresseliers, de Munster has come back into the pit lane even after clearing his second mandatory pit stop. So it's a bit of a curious one as to what has brought the number 3 back in. And so now we have confirmation as to why that is. We've just got word in there from Matthijs de Munster. Game has crashed. He's one of the drivers on Series S. But that is a mighty unfortunate there. One of the major takeaways from this performance today, though, from Matthijs de Munster, he did have a very, very solid driver of things. Got into quite a few good battles down in GT4. Sadly, this just not been the way he wanted today to end here. He sadly looks to be... if he can get the car back up and running, he could see the checkered flag, but he's going to be down quite a few steps here before we get to that point. So taking a look at the field at the moment as Pascal Stolz is into the pit lane, that's going to allow Alejandro Gonzalez to potentially come back through to lead in this race. He's in through turn 13 at the moment. Stolz still in the pits, getting new tyres and fuel with 42 minutes to the line here. Now, a few drivers still left to take their pit stops, includes Mr. Scallops, Luca Foll, Vincent Simard, Benoit Luxalder, Tom Wells, and was it Chris Egert-Runkianen? There's also in that fray as well, Sebastian Turner. So there we see Gonzalez retakes the lead just as Stolz is released from the jacks. And now no real threat that he could be intercepted by Mr. Scallops here, though it has been a very admirable show of force by the current championship leader over on the multi-class endurance, not multi-class endurance, sorry, multi-class championship. And that's over on season 3 on HCCL. Actually, no, he does intercept, so I am quite surprised by that one. I don't know exactly how far up the pit lane Pascal Stolz was. Under strategy, at least, Scallops will be eventually losing out that second place spot if he doesn't stand to lose it out on track. Look at there in the foreground. That was the number 22. Morris W2, trouble out through the Juxgate in towards Barbecue as we see Luca Foll and Vincent Simard are into the pit lane just before the 40-minute mark here in Kyalami. They are marking among the final runnings of pit lane entries for some. We still wait to see what the word is for Mr. Scallops, having most recently moved up to second place. But you can see Pascal Stolz, once he gets those Pirellis primed and in temperature, it is a game of when, not if. He'll be alongside Mr. Scallops before the pit lane entry expected for the 394 in the next couple of laps. Still yet to see anything from Benoit Luxalder, Tom Wells, or for that matter, Chris Egert-Runkianen or Sebastian Turner. See there, that is Gonzalez carving his way back through the crowd. Benoit Luxalder down in 7th place. We see there in the lead is Alejandro Gonzalez. We see right alongside the GT4 leader at this time, or soon to be GT4 leader, as we still wait to see what is the word for Tom Wells. You see here for Stolz, waiting to see what the word is, and he led for but a moment there, Mr. Scallops, but into the pit lane goes the 394, and now his chances remain a little bit up in the air as to if he can hope to stay with Bayer by the end of this race. The Lamborghini just about to overtake before he's really even come to a stop in his pit lane box. We see there comes to a stop just as Bayer crosses out through turn 16, now up and ahead of Morris W. Also had a huge snap of oversteer through turn 16 there. We just saw Rafael Bayer moves up to 3rd. I mean, you've got to hand it to him here. He has really gone above and beyond the call of duty for Lamborghini here in South Africa. Also having come into the pits at the same time as Mr. Scallops has just been cleared from his jacks there. That's Benoit Luxalder on his way out. Stephen Sutton moves up to 7th. And Anthony Valorio looks to move up to 8th place there for Aston Martin. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Aston Martin start from the pit lane? So we had quite a few pit lane starts, I'm pretty sure. Was Valorio among them? Regardless, it has still been a fantastic performance, if not, for the 41 Aston Martin, especially when you consider going all the way back into the discussion of balance of performance. They were not expected to do well today here in South Africa. With 15 kilos on board, they were really set to be on the short end of the stick, more so than Ford, and that's a rare occasion that anyone outshines Ford for getting the worst balance of performance of any GT3 cars in circulation. So with Aston Martin up against the ropes here, they have done quite a solid job in the hands of Anthony Valorio, a driver who has seen quite the variety of GT3s already. tends to prefer the older machines, as we've seen there in his time with Ferrari in the 488. So for him to move up to slightly newer machinery, I say slightly newer as if the 488 GT3 Evo wasn't kicking around at the same time as the V8 Vantage. I think it's just a case where I kind of always assume the ones that aren't in circulation anymore are the ones that are quite anachronistic. But no, it's a case where some of the cars of that era do outshine others, the Aston among them. Of course, we saw great results for Aston Martin yesterday in the hands of 5-Star Esports' Riyad Yasarevich, and Carlos Disch brought it home to a podium finish for the 5-Star Esports team at the 3 Hours of Imola in the Console Endurance Series yesterday. That was a great round, the 3 Hours of Imola. Shortest race of the season. Gave us a very hectic run of things in wet and wild weather at the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Idino Ferrari. So looking at the scope of things here, we are seeing a close fight here. Logan Perry versus Thibaut Dresselier. Porsche versus Aston. We can see that the gaps on average, at least up in GT3, are starting to get slimmer. We see about 3 seconds there between Valorio and Sutton. Like Zaldo about 8 seconds at this time. Meanwhile, this is the closest gap of any two drivers on track for position. Dresselier v Perry. Oh, into the wall there. Very nearly. Oh my goodness. Have a look at this on the replays just quickly. Just as we get on board with Thibaut Dresselier, we see that second half of the incident. I'm pretty sure. So there, just over rotates past turn 5. We see it there. And I think just as we caught, yes, he avoided it by millimeters. We see down in the bottom right-hand side, some side-by-side action at the moment as Dresselier drops in behind Runkianen. Runkianen still yet to have taken their final pit stop, but that's the same story at the moment for another GT4 on the field. We see here for Tom Wells. LeBay actually not too far away whatsoever, about 6.2 seconds. Wells reluctant to come in. So you see here for Tom Breuer, the chances are getting closer and closer and closer. The longer that Ginetta stays out for Alpine to potentially take up the slack of a podium here in Kyalami. Now this could be quite the solid turnaround, all things considered, for Breuer. Started up on the front row, had a great qualifying session. Alpine put on to pole position. And where things definitely did go south for him for some time in this race, he looks to tie things up in the last 35 minutes of racing. Now, we still have that story, two drivers yet to pit. And we'll see really in the case of two, who pulls the trigger first. Will it be Chris Eggert Runkianen or will it be Tom Wells? Well, Tom Wells closest to the pit lane. He's got the first opportunity of either to have a go. Meanwhile, just observing the gap at the moment between Sutton and Valorio, I've just seen it drop down by half its previous distance from 3 seconds to 1.3. So that's actually a little under half of its current distance. So we will be catching on with them, just as we see here. Into the pit lane goes Tom Wells. So the GT4 lead now in, leaving Christian Lebay to retake the lead of GT4. We'll see where he emerges in a moment's time. We catch on board here with a progressing fight inside of the GT3 field. This is for 7th place between Anthony Valorio with Aston Martin and Stephen Sutton with Ford. You see for Wells, he's been overtaken by Lebay, and it seems to be the case there as well that Tanguay's overtaken him. Now the question remains for Tom Breuer. Can he potentially have a go here on Tom Wells? Bear in mind that Ginetta is not far off of dropping off the jacks, but he has really kept this one for quite a long pit stop here. So there is the open chance for Breuer as well. Still yet to drop off the jacks, so the chances are slimming up for him, and looks by it at the moment that Tom Breuer will return to the podium. 33 minutes to the line. Tom Wells still has the chance of a top 5 here in Kyalami, but this has been a remarkably slow stop for the number 818. 20 seconds of repairs, reports Tom Wells at this time. So a very slow stop whilst they patch up some parts of the car there. He's definitely put the Ginetta through the ringer in this race. Now, personally, from where we were looking, we couldn't see too much damage that would have brought out any sort of major red flags amongst the pit crew, but evidently they saw differently at Ginetta and have had to piece that number 818 back together. Now, under strategy, he's in good books here. He'll return to the top 4 at the very least, and we'll end this race in the top 5. Ahead of Chris Eggert Runkianen, still yet to take their final pit stop. Now, our predictions had it placed that maybe he's gunning for the last 30 to 25 minutes of racing for his next available pit window. He's played things extra long in his first pit stop, still with one left to serve. The number 380 has got a lot on his plate here before the end of this race. Talking about having a lot on your plate, I think we're about to get into the midst of another fight here. This one between Valorio and Sutton. Let's go and catch on board with either side of this progressing fight as we see. That was momentarily a view from Matthias de Munster being lapped there by Christian Lebay. We're trying to catch on board, though, at this time with either Stephen Sutton or Anthony Valorio. We see in the last lap there was a difference by half a second between the Aston Martin and the Ford. We'll watch with the defending angle of things. We see the 22 brings out the yellow flags. That's once again Morris W. in trouble down at turns 10 and 11 at Urquhart. As we see here with Stephen Sutton. And the very rare occasion we're able to use some of the currently existing GT3 multi-class championship season 3 placards. The stars align here to give us at least one in the case of Stephen Sutton up in GT3, the other being Christian Lebay, still staying with his mainline championship option, the 119 Chevrolet down in GT4. Now, of course, Tom Wells is still using the same car, but he's used a different number. He runs the number 12 in that championship and the 818 today, his personal number. Now, Stephen Sutton, though, it's the same Ford, the same GT3, the same number 7. We're watching currently the defending half of that fight for 7th place. 31 minutes to the line here in Kyalami on what has been a brilliant special event so far. And now, whilst we've just got a momentary break in this fight, we will keep an active eye on this one as we get down to the opening straight. Just to remind you of what this event is all about, of course, this is a charity race for St. Jude Children's Hospital. Just to quickly give you a notice here, whilst we've got a break in this fight, to take a look back into it just briefly. St. Jude Children's Hospital is a non-profit organisation that helps children in need of treatment for cancer, blood disorders, neurological disorders, infectious diseases, or other catastrophic childhood conditions while not charging the family a bill, so that they can focus on what matters the most without the stress. 89% of St. Jude's funding comes from donations, which is what makes this all possible. If you're watching, you'll find just now posted into the Twitch chat the donation link if you are looking to donate towards this charity. As that's what this event is all about. This is to help raise awareness and to bring support to such a great cause. And that statement you see on screen was published by HCCL on their SimGrid. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can find the donation link in the description for this event. Still watching then in this fight for 7th place, and we've not gone anywhere in terms of positioning. Still defending away from 7th place is Stephen Sutton, away from Anthony Valorio. Those two had a great run of things up through Sector 1 just during the read there. You see them starting to roll up onto the GT4s there. Matthias de Munster and Christian Lebay just up over the nose of these two as they make their way in towards turn 10. Valorio struggling a little bit for aero wash out behind the Mustang. You see there, forced out wide by de Munster. So for Stephen Sutton, he does get to hold on to a position a little bit easier now after that wedge being formed between himself and Valorio by the lap traffic down in GT4. To give an update as well on the amount of money raised so far over the course of this event. In the last running of this event, when it was originally planned to run at Spa. I think they raised somewhere in the ballpark of $157. Today here in Kyalami, they've raised an additional $65. So do the rough maths on that, brings you up over $200, 210, more than $210 in the approximate maths of it. We'll do the exact maths at a later date, but moreover, over $200 has been raised by HCCL alone to go towards St. Jude Children's Hospital through both of these events. It's a pity then for us here on TRTN, and we can't apologise enough for how things unfolded down in Spa, where technical failure sadly took us away from the opportunity to broadcast that fantastic event. Huge grid indeed, well over 40 cars on that first run in the 2.4 hours of Spa, but we are still honoured to be selected as the broadcaster for this event, this special charity event, the 2.4 hours of Kyalami. 27.5 minutes left to go then. We're still on board with Stephen Sutton as the fight for 7th re-emerges between himself and Anthony Valorio down through turn 15. Looking over the rear view then as the Aston Martin looms near. Looking at the wider grid whilst we stay on board with these two at this time. Any nearby gaps, taking a look around it, and it'll be Logan Perry versus Thibaut Dresselier, as both of them have now been taken up for position there by Julian Pereira. In fact, if we just quickly look here with Dresselier, you can see just how close the gap is between himself and Logan Perry. The Aston Martin does actually have a chance here to have a go down towards turn 6. See Dresselier cut him off. Not out of turn 6, sorry, out of turn 7. We see we want to try and catch on with the Aston Martin before it's too late, and we see there Logan Perry has got up and around Thibaut Dresselier. Getting past the pair of them, Rafael Bayer with Lamborghini up in GT3. 26.5 minutes left to go then here in South Africa on what has been a fantastic race so far. Cutting away from their fight back onto the GT3 fight, we catch here now the attacking angle of two on with Anthony Valorio. We are actually able to get on additional graphics here with Valorio. Still in that fight then for 7th place between himself and Stephen Sutton. You can see in between the pair of them there, Dion Helgelien, a driver we normally see these days up in GT3. Now takes a trip down towards GT4 for this race in particular. Down the opening straight then in towards turn 1, and the last lap was off by just over 0.2 of a second. Valorio is sort of been yo-yoing for time between himself and Stephen Sutton, and now one of the major factors that have kept him at arm's length for the longest time has been the presence of lapped traffic, and things are not exactly getting much lighter for them as they're heading up into another wad of traffic at the moment, starting off with Malorex just up ahead of them in the 777 Aston Martin down in GT4. 25 minutes left to go then here in Kyalami. We do see yellow flags out again, this time for the 22. Morris W has had a very challenging race here in Kyalami. It has not been a gracious run so far for the Swiss driver in McLaren. He's had many troubles for stability with that machine over the course of the last 2 hours here as we drop onto the 24-minute mark. 2 hours of racing in, 24 left to go here in the 2.4 hours of Kyalami. You see here the fight between Valorio and Sutton out through turn 2 into turns 3 and 4. Now we heard the sound of gravel being kicked up just up in front of them there, so our eyes would be shifting in the direction still going on here of the fight that has since turned itself back around between Jessalier and Perry. We're about to see two worlds collide again here in Kyalami, with these two approaching at a rate of knots. We see up the road 7/10 of a second is the gap between those two. You can just see them there in the foreground, in the background I should say, sorry, from the view of Anthony Valorio. But let's not distract ourselves with what's going on up ahead, as right up in front of us here was the first of potentially many chances in the next 23 minutes for these two to go head to head out through the S's. A little wobble from turn 7 down through to turn 8 and turn 9 has put the wheels in motion here for Valorio to properly get his elbows out now to fight with Stephen Sutton. Now through turn 10, now turn 11, and the Ford just able to pull away slightly from the Aston as we head down towards turn 12. This could get dicey. Logan Perry there, you can see in the Aston, temporarily holds up Valorio for just a few tenths of a second. In towards turn 13 we go. We see that the Aston, number 25, on the inside of the number 41. So a very bizarre one indeed out through turn 15 here. We see Thibaut Jessalier just up over the nose of Anthony Valorio. He's trying to navigate the GT4s, but is having a very hard time doing so because these two, much like he and Sutton, are in a fight. Oh my goodness gracious me, what went on there? With the 25, I believe, collided with the 22, or with the wall trying to avoid the 22. What on earth has gone on there? Now having got himself clear of the GT4s, but at what cost? Valorio now 1.9 seconds away from Sutton. Jessalier clear at the moment of Perry, with the 22 in the midst of them both. Things have just gotten very, very sour on both fronts. You see here the culprit in question. The 22 had trouble out through turn 16, was turned around the wrong way. Not much he could have done in that situation. A deer in the proverbial headlights. Roman Palmer F1 saying no blue flag. I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. I'm not sure what their rules are in navigating the blue flags here. With multi-class racing, it's often the role of the faster vehicle to do the overtake safely. And that's a bit more of a relaxed approach we've seen used by quite a few leagues, especially when it comes to the brass tacks of multi-class racing. Now, the GT4s, if they're fighting for position, realistically, we've seen them move over before and be fine, but not many of them follow on the same doctrine. It is usually analysed on a case-by-case basis, at least in some leagues. I can't speak for absolutely every league, nor can I speak for what HCCL's desires are. But considering that the drivers have more than likely been given these instructions before, that it's a case where it's the role of the GT3s to get the overtake in properly without any problems, that still does leave the rules open to be exploited in cases like that, where the GT4s are going to be clashing heads. They're not going to be, you know, playing nicely in this situation. And that can end up with the incidents we just saw there. "20 minutes left to go then. On board with Rafael Bayer, we see Tom Breuer alongside him there. The little Alpine that could. Started from pole position, has had a rough ride of things here in Kyalami, but is back up onto the podium. The 159 looking to see third by the end of this race. Just to cut back on board here with the 22. Runs into even more trouble. This time out through turn 2. I mean, it comes to be the question, is he running any traction control at all? Because he spun himself around a second time in the same section of the track. Now he's into the water. He's like a bull in a china shop. I'm not one to point fingers here, but there comes to a point where maybe the towel ought to be thrown in, because that's 3 spins just trying to get onto the track. Is that going to be 4th? Right, 3.5. Very bizarre stuff. Surely he's got to have no traction control on that car. And we see there Pascal Stoltz right up over his nose. Holds up the 172. I'm sure the steward's investigation is coming now for the 22, if it wasn't already. So you see, what is he doing? What is the 22 doing? There comes a point where you just got to sit down and have a word with yourself. Very confusing stuff. I think we can roughly see what the rationale was, but the way that he went about it, by the time he had already committed to moving to the left-hand side of the track, he was being passed on the left by Pascal Stoltz and very nearly cut him off. And that's just... I'm not 100% sure. I try to treat every driver in the same light here, and it's just a confusing one, analysing what on earth just went on there for the 22. Less on that, more on this. We cut across the rest of the field. We see Luca Foal in the top 5 at the moment for GT3. This is set to be a solid result for the 97 over the course of today's race. It's had a fair share of good fights throughout. And Mr. Scallops, he's eyeing up 4th place at this time. Great result for the Ferrari. Rafael Bayer gunning for 3rd place with Lamborghini. We see here, once again, the fight kicking back off between Logan Perry and Thibaut Dresselier. Looking into the standings once again. See closest gaps on track at the moment. Kevin Pereira versus Alexandre Abro. You see that big step out of oversteer. That fishtailed back into the grass for a moment, and that's what gave easy leeway for the 797 to move up to 10th place. Up goes through into 10th for Kevin Pereira. Of course, we discussed briefly there the close gap between these two. We see things kick off there, nearly into the wall again for Dresselier. That allows Perry to come up alongside in towards turn 8 and 9, tucks back in behind through the S's. Up through to turn 10 we go then. We see the Porsche all over the shop with the Aston Martin trying to find even an ounce of space over the Porsche. The Porsche runs way out on the brakes, same as the Aston. These two struggling to find any kind of footing in this track at the moment. Kevin Pereira is approaching at a rate of knots here. This is a scary sign for these two. So we see the Ford goes up the inside on the Aston. The 25 running all the way out wide at turn 12. Looking to try and get up on the inside of the 227. Meanwhile, that gap between Sutton and Valorio is coming to a head here up through the Juxgay sweep. We see the Ford still leading ahead of the Aston in the fight for 7th up in GT3. We are analysing 2 battles in the scope of 1. We see going up the inside Logan Perry on at Thibaut Dresselier. And by looks of it there, a bit of a step out for the 25. He stunted his momentum and he's allowed the Porsche to just scoot back in over his rear. These two trying to wash out to the left-hand side of the track that they saw just approaching from alongside them was Alejandro Gonzalez, the race leader in GT3, who cut back on board with these two just briefly here. After the absolute melee that was their fight in GT4 at the moment, by the looks of it here, getting on board with Dresselier, he's looking to go back up over Logan Perry. These two have been absolutely brutalizing each other here. We are not far from, by looks of it, a contact between these two as they're properly shoving each other around here. This is some touring cars level action out of GT4 right in the closing quarter hour of racing. Out through turn 6 up towards turn 7, the 25 of Perry looking for his chances right behind them there. By looks of it, looks to be that of Luca Foal in the 97. Gets up past 1, then up past 2, but the Porsche's right alongside him there. But gunning into the gravel allows the 25 to go up and around the outside, and they bash doors on the run around the S's. In towards turn 10, the Aston will be to the inside, the Porsche to the outside. What can they do in the face of it all? Logan Perry up the inside. And now holds on to position after what was a brutal exchange between the pair. Now we catch on board proper. After skipping around for some time, we can finally knuckle down in on this fight for just a little while longer. Valorio v Sutton. Now at their closest in the last couple of laps, these two were but 0.3 of a second apart from one another. Now we see at the last interval where it was about 0.75 of a second, 730 thousandths. That drops down to just over half a second, showing some definite positive signs here for Aston Martin in the opening sector. Now, can they join everything up in sector 2 being the question, because they'll need it for the run into sector 3. Bear in mind, we're still monitoring that gap. Just in the background, Dresselier back up and ahead of Perry. As we try to focus on one fight at a time here, we see Valorio and Sutton heading down towards Lurcott. Late on the brakes for both, but they tuck things in nicely through turn 10, now out through turn 11. Meanwhile, the 119 at this time is now encountering traffic as well. That's Christian LeBay, the leader of the GT4 category at this time. Looks to be on his chances here to win in the 2.4 hours of Kyalami in about 13.5 minutes time. It's been a stellar performance by Malwa Racing Chevrolet, as they are gunning for a 1-2 finish here, with Tanguay following in suit there in the number 30 car in the second spot of this grid. Third place looks to go to Tom Breuer, who we just see lingering in the background of this fight there. You can see the little Alpine heading down the opening straight, and really quite an inspiring story to see the Alpine come along and do such a great performance really on this grid. See here for Sutton, still fighting with Valorio. And it really does go to show as well, just having a look here, we've been speaking on a few occasions about size differences in some of these cars. I think one of the more extreme ends of it you would see was earlier on in this race, the fight between the Chevrolets and the Alpines and the Ginettas for that matter. It's even something that exists within GT3 though. Have a look here. The difference in size between, this is a 2019 or 2018 model Aston Martin V8 Vantage GT3. Bear in mind, it's still quite a large car in its own respect, but it pales in comparison to that 2024 Ford Mustang. The number 128 has been given a drive-through for track limits. That's for Sebastian Turner with Ginetta. So we see, having dropped way down the order now to 25th in this race, and at the back of the GT4 grid is Jussilia, was fighting for the longest time with Logan Perry, now drops in behind Matthias de Munster at the back of the GT4 field and at the back of the field outright in this event. So whilst we were focusing on this fight currently for 7th place between Anthony Valorio and Stephen Sutton up in GT3, we failed to see what on earth happened there for Dresselier. Now, with stability being of major concern to the 227 for the majority of today's race, I would not say it's out of the realm of possibility to suggest that he has spun in the time we last saw him, and that's what's dropped him out of the fight with the 25 of Logan Perry. Alternatively, with how much intensity those two were bringing to the table in their fight, I would also say equal parts, it's likely that one of them has killed the other, effectively. They have come into contact and taken each other out. Either theory equally plausible. We see here for LeBay getting up and around Logan Perry, lapping past the 25, but we're going to go and catch on board with these two, Stephen Sutton and Anthony Valorio, as we pick back up where we left off on a continued fight inside of the top 10. This is for 7th place on board with the number 7 of Stephen Sutton. Up the road, you can see there on Runkianen and Pereira going head-to-head. A very bizarre matchup. That's another thing to consider as well. Chris Eggert Runkianen finally having taken their final pit stop. I mean, that was a very long-winded strategy there for the Estonian. He finds himself tucked in behind Dion Helgelian in 7th in division. Actually, hang on. No, it's 6th place for Runkianen. So not a bad time at all, really, for the Porsche. Very unorthodox strategy, all things considered. But push come to shove, he is still in a solid position. He's in 6th, just shy of the top 5. But not too bad at all. The 128 has one more lap to serve that drive-through. Otherwise, it looks to be disqualification, as we've seen already today, for speeding infractions. Earlier on for Stephen Black, the 707 was disqualified from this race. A very rare occasion where something like that happens. And you see here over the rear view and over that rear wing of the Mustang of Stephen Sutton, still fighting with Anthony Valorio every step of the way here as we drop into the last 10 minutes of racing. Now to get a look at the standings for the last time before the checkered flag. Gonzalez leads, Stoltz second by a third, Scallops 4th, Foal 5th, Simard in 6th. You're watching the fight here between Stephen Sutton in 7th and Anthony Valorio just behind in that Aston Martin in 8th place, Benoit Alexander in 9th and Kevin Pereira in 10th. Alexandra Abro in 11th. Then onto the GT4s. We see here 12th overall, but then in division rankings, LeBay leads with Tanguay 2nd, Breuer 3rd, Wells 4th, Helgelian 5th, Runkianen in 6th. Malarex in division 7th, then in division 8th, Oliver Swaver division 9th, but looking at a drive-through penalty to drop behind Logan Perry. Chances there for Sebastian Turner to drop down out of the division top 10. Logan Perry in division 10th, division 11th for Matthias de Munster, division 12th for Dresselier. We also see in terms of a localized division for GT3, out past 11th place, so that's 12th for the number 22. And for Julian Pereira, that's 13th, but on paper there, 19th and 20th. In the time we were watching with them, they just got past David Tanguay in the number 30, up in the top 3 of the GT4s. But still watching with what has been a very long-winded fight and great defense so far by Stephen Sutton. He's got good consistency and good form here. He's kept himself out of harm's way of that Aston Martin. And he's been playing into the strengths of that Mustang throughout this race today. And that's what's giving him this top 7 result at the moment. In that last lap, he was faster by just over a tenth of a second on Anthony Valorio. Actually, just under, I think, there. It would have been 95 thousandths, because I'm pretty sure for Valorio, it was a 43.320. For Sutton, a 43.225. So that is, yeah, 95 thousandths of a second between the pair. You see running into a huge wad of traffic here on board with Sutton. Getting up past Jusselier. Then up past Morris. Morris again spun around to the S's. I mean, it's got to be a case now. I really am trying my hardest here, but it's really got to be a case where he's not running any traction control whatsoever. And on a McLaren 720S, that's a death sentence. So I have no idea what's going on there. You see here, attempting to navigate past Julian Pereira. Anthony Valorio held up just for a moment. That's going to give a little bit of extra space over towards Stephen Sutton, up by 1.1 seconds. So that slowly kills off this phase of the fight for 7th place. He gets to hold on to 7th for the time being. You can see that wad of time placed over Valorio, lost 7 tenths in that last lap alone. Looking around the field then for where other fights may be emerging from, as we've been watching with a fight of 7th in GT3 for some time, having a look around the track to see what else could be going on at this time. And I think we come up empty-handed in all but one department, and that, once again, as we continue to scroll around, we'll end up back at our same point here, currently watching on with that fight of 7th place. I believe we just watched a car disconnect as well in front of our very eyes there. I'm not 100% sure what it is I just saw, but I could have sworn there was a car that just disappeared up in front of Stephen Sutton there. See the LeBay's up in front there in the 119. It wasn't the Chevrolet that vanished. I'm not sure that was the case. 5.5 minutes left to go. Not a great time if someone's had a disconnect now. So yeah, definitely does seem to be the case here. In all but few departments that is the closest fight on the track at the moment. So we'll go and take a look with the attacking point of view now. We've been following on board with Stephen Sutton for some time now. We cut back on with Anthony Valorio. These two have stolen away the show in the last 10 minutes here as the closest fight, and by looks of it, one of the only fights left on track here in the 2.4 hours of Kyalami as things start to simmer down with 5 minutes left to go before the checkered flag. In the last lap there, not too far off the pace of Stephen Sutton, but off by about 110 thousandths of a second. So we did get word that there was a disconnect, and it was once again Matthias de Munster. This time it was an overheat on the Xbox. So for some context, quite a few of us on this grid are using the Xbox Series S. As it turns out, when you push up toward about north of 20, 25 cars, it starts to stress the Xbox out quite a bit. Now, this is a gamble we've been playing with for years now on TRTM. We've seen grids upwards of nearly 40 cars, and we've managed just fine. But Lord knows that the Xbox doesn't often sound like it's taxiing to a runway and about to take off, because honestly, I'd be surprised if I can do any more of these races before that thing bursts into flames. Evidently, that's what's gone on for Matthias de Munster. He's obviously had his Xbox a little longer than I have. And that's what's happened, an overheat. To be fair, it is a huge gamble these organizations do play with in terms of going well beyond benchmark for these consoles. Now, on paper, the actual capped out player limit for these servers is supposed to be about 20 cars on paper. That's what G-Portal set it as. But leagues have found time and time again that you can extend this up past this quote-unquote safe limit. And that's what these organizations do. That's what allows us to get on what is theoretically only framework designed for 20 cars. This is what allows leagues to get up to 30 to 40 to even extreme ends of it, 50 cars on a grid. But what it does do is now you're pushing well past what the console can handle, because that's what's going to break first in the competition against a mainline server stack over at G-Portal up against a £250 or about €300 Xbox Series S. In that competition, we come up losing every time. And obviously that's happened before. That's ultimately what took us out of being able to broadcast the 2.4 hours of Spa, was an overheat and a video rendering error, where the GPU on ours physically could not handle rendering the entire track and all of the cars on it, because that's the conversation we had with a couple of the folks at HCCL not long after we were forced to pull the event broadcast offline. We ended up having this chat and we ended up discovering a lot about how the game chooses to render on console. Now, when you're in spectator mode like we are, it renders absolutely everything, every car on track and the entire track. So when you go to a big location, like for example Spa, the largest FIA Grade 1 track in the world, or you go to the Nürburgring, the largest currently still used racetrack in the world, you have to render all of it. And I really do mean every corner, every curb, every blade of grass. And that's not particularly fun on the Xbox. And then put 50 or so cars on top of it, and you've created a hand grenade. And that's ultimately what happened back in Spa. Fortunately, we've been able to get through this broadcast today with about a minute and a half left to go, and no issues our end. But again, this is not a shared thing. Obviously, there have been issues before. Sadly, that's taken Matthias de Munster out of today's event. In the case of his Xbox, first it was a game crash, if I'm not mistaken, then the next was hardware failure. And we've seen hardware failure already today as well. Some drivers had steering failures, and we even saw yesterday in some of the events we were covering that steering failures have crept up on some. So as you've just heard there, the leader is on the final lap. We've been watching with Anthony Valorio and Stephen Sutton in their chartered fight for 7th place for some time here. Now within half a second of one another, we might be following these two all the way down to the checkered flag. Just taking a look around the track to see where the nearest fights could be coming from. Turner v Dresselier up the inside, then Turner looking at his chances with Logan Perry just up the road in a damaged Aston Martin. There could be two positions up for grabs here on the horizon just as we enter the final running of laps here in Kyalami. Not long from the checkered flag, we'll be catching on board with the 99, but it's contact between the 128 and the 227. It forces a wedge there over the nose of the 172. That's Pascal Stoltz trying to find his way through the crowd here, but can barely find any headroom. Is that going to compromise his run of things in terms of catching up towards Gonzalez, or in terms of Bayer catching up to him? Not very likely at all. Not long from now, we'll be catching on board with Alejandro Gonzalez, set to become the winner here in the 2.4 hours of Kyalami. Wins in GT3 and wins outright, but not long from now, we'll wait until exactly we see the checkered flag to follow the 99 down towards it. As we see here with Stoltz, then we quickly catch back on board with Sutton and Valorio. They're in towards their final lap of racing here. As they've crossed the start-finish line, we'll be seeing them down towards the checkered flag not long from now. In the case of that fight from before, we see that Turner now up past Dresselier, but Perry far off in the distance. More on that as it progresses, though. Following him down towards the line, the checkered flag awaits the arrival of the number 99. Winning in the HCCL 2.4 hours of Kyalami race for children is Alejandro Gonzalez in the number 99. Ferrari 296. He wins in GT3 and wins outright here in Kyalami. A fantastic drive from the Spaniard today. Brilliant, brilliant stuff indeed. Coming to the line then for second place, Pascal Stoltz in his drive with Ford. We've seen him in a variety of vehicles and he excels every step of the way. The 172 second at the end of today's race. Not long from now, we'll be seeing the arrival of Rafael Bayer to the line with Lamborghini. A valiant drive today from the Black Nitro Racing talent. What a drive it has been today here for the 28. A great foot in the door here for Black Nitro Racing. Rafael Bayer comes to the line then. A brilliant third place for Lamborghini. Mr. Scallops looking at fourth then as it's been locked out from behind him. Luca Fall fifth, Vincent Simard in sixth place. Stephen Sutton and Anthony Valorio are still awaiting the checkered flag. And we'll be seeing down towards the line then who comes out on top in that charge for seventh. It has been brilliant defense in the last 10 or so minutes of racing here for Stephen Sutton, and it pays off as out through turn 16, a drag race to the line, ultimately one that he stands to win in the fight for seventh. It's seventh for Sutton, eighth for Valorio. We've had a driver leave from up in front of them, so that shoved them forward a peg, but we'll wait for the full results to come through. Also, taking a look into the GT4s, not long from the line then, he was actually waylaid by a lap here, so we do get the pleasure of seeing down towards the line in GT4. We've already announced the GT3 race winner to be Alejandro Gonzalez, but heading down towards the line, Christian Lebay wins in GT4 here in the 2.4 hours of Kyalami. A great win indeed down in the GT4 division. Great performance by Malwa Racing Chevrolet, a 1-2 finish in GT4. Joy and jubilations there for the 119. So 2 division wins here in the 2.4 hours of Kyalami. In GT3, Alejandro Gonzalez in the 99. In GT4, Christian Lebay in the 119. Taking a look at that full result then, Gonzalez wins in GT3, Stoltz second, Bayer third, Scallops fourth, Fall fifth, Simard sixth, Sutton seventh, Valorio eighth, Luxalda ninth, Pereira in 10th, that's Kevin Pereira. Abro in 11th, and then into GT4, Lebay wins, Tanguay second, Breuer onto the podium, a valiant comeback drive there for the Alpine. Tom Wells in the top 5, Helge Leon in 5th, Ronkian in 6th, Malarek 7th. And then we see division, looking at it there, division... in 12th and 13th for Morris W. and Julian Pereira. Then from behind Malarex, then Swaver, Perry, Turner, Jesselier and De Munster. Then you see your DNF, Sudza, Blaska, Chaperon Tirulance, Hebden, Veyers, Rotinsky, Martel, Cardoso and Black. What a race, though, it has been here, and a real pleasure from us here on TRTN to come along and broadcast for such a special event here on HCCL. A fantastic performance here in South Africa, rife with action. Some great fights all the way to the end there. Brilliant, brilliant stuff indeed. Very well done to our race winners then in division, Gonzalez and Lebay. 2 race wins for the price of 1 race today. Great stuff. And very well done to everyone who's made their way to the end of this event. It was quite the trek for some here in Kyalami. A tough race indeed, but one that gave us some fantastic fighting here in the High Caliber Community League. That's all from us here on TRTN. It has been a real pleasure from us to come along and work on such a special event here. And we're happy that things are finally wrapped up nice, neat and tidy after how things panned out for us in Spa. To be able to come back and make right on that is something quite important to us as well. That's all from us here on TRTN. The next race coming up in our broadcast schedule will be on Wednesday morning in Europe, otherwise Tuesday evening on the Eastern Standard Time, and that's going to be for the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. That's when you'll next see us. Until then, that's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care and good night.